Chapter 1899. This precise blow made Jingza feel as if his lower limbs were cracking, as if the sky was falling down. He had never thought that he would be beaten so badly by a baby. Boom! Endless black great Tao runes of the Master of Shadow, Tao appeared on Wang Nuan's body. As the creator of this Tao, her small body exuded boundless godly might, like a god of war. Without using any other spells at all, the pure physical strength of the Master of Shadow Tao's great Tao overlaid on top of Jingza's body was enough to overwhelm this dragon descendant. Bang! Bang! There were two loud bangs as Wang Nuan kicked him away. The instant he was sent flying, she moved again. Carrying her, Lung Ming's speed was unbelievably fast. When Jingzai moved to the next coordinate, Lung Ming and the little girl accurately predicted Jingzai's landing point and arrived ahead of time. Then they kicked Jingzai's spine hard. Baizhi couldn't believe his eyes. Wang Nuan's growth rate was too terrifying. In some sense, she might be even more amazing than when he had been born. How could a little girl be so strong? He didn't dare believe it. Crack! Wang Nuan's kick could be said to be merciless. She directly broke Jingzai's spine. Everyone present could clearly hear the sound of Jingzai's spine breaking. His entire body was sent flying, and he was covered in blood. Yeah, Wang Nuan said. Lung Ming, who had his own simultaneous interpreter, translated on the side. My sword master said that you're too weak, and a dragon descendant at that. Furthermore, it was a dragon descendant. This was too embarrassing. Also, you'll find that the eternal moon starlight on you doesn't work, because my sword master used his Shadow Tao ability to cover it up. Cough! Jingza coughed up blood on the ground. He had already put on a mask of pain, and his face was twisted. He really couldn't understand how the word Ya could translate so many things. Ya. At that moment, Wang Nuan gave another order. Lung Ming understood, and without another word he stepped on Jingza's broken spine. Behave, my sword master wants to borrow something from you. After saying that, he directly reached his hand in. The moment his fingertips fell, they turned into soft grass, and then directly cut open Jingzai's back along his spine. Lung Ming skillfully took out a jade bottle and gathered as much of Jingza's dragon's pine blood into it. This time, Wang Nuan did not bring her original mount, SCP-096. When the little girl thought that her lovely rabbit was still waiting at home, she suddenly had an idea. Jingza was a little weak, but the dragon's pine blood was a good supplement. It was perfect as a midnight snack. Furthermore, SCP-096 still had a lot of room for growth. It still needed time to develop, and dragon's pine blood was the perfect supplement. The corners of Jingzai's mouth twitched. He lay on the ground with a pained expression, unable to move, allowing Wang Nuan and Lung Ming to do whatever they wanted to him. As the descendant of a dragon, he had suffered such humiliation twice for no reason. He had been taught a lesson by Wang Ling last time, and this time, he was taught a lesson by Wang Nuan. This pair of siblings from the Wang clan was too frightening. Jingzai realized that he couldn't afford to offend them. Girl, you're having fun beating me up. But have you ever thought that your house would be on fire? At that moment, Jingzai sneered. He knew that he couldn't die. Even if he failed in this mission and failed to bring Wang Muyu back, luring Wang Ling away and taking Wang Muyu away was only the second step in the whole plan. If they went further in, they had in fact arranged for another group of people to be sent directly to the Wang family's small villa. The purpose was none other than to assassinate the Wang family. Whether it was Father Wang or Mother Wang, they had already been included in Baiji's purge list. The grave god had failed in his attack on the Wang family last time, but Baizhi felt that he had a good chance of succeeding this time without Wang Ling around. Most importantly, the strongest little girl was also in the core world now. With Jingza and him keeping an eye on her from behind, Baizhi felt that there was a good chance that little girl Nuan would succeed this time. Elsewhere in the Wang family's small villa, there was actually an anxious atmosphere. Their daughter and son weren't around, and although father and mother Wang didn't show it on the surface, they were in fact very worried. It wasn't that they were worried about Wang Nuan's strength, but that they were worried about everything else. After all, little girl Nuan had only been born a few months ago, and she had actually been sent to maintain peace on Earth. Even Father Wang felt that he couldn't write such a melodramatic plot. Thus, the current situation was that old Wang and his wife were waiting at home. Without anyone at home, they couldn't even eat to their heart's content. Father Wang had no appetite for food, and could only sit in front of the computer and smoke. His fingers clutched the keyboard as he pondered for a long time, but couldn't write a single word. Looks like I can only use the manuscript library. Father Wang cupped his chin as he pondered. He was so agitated that he couldn't calm down even after smoking several cigarettes in a row. Looking at the SQQ profile picture that kept jumping around, Father Wang finally steeled his heart and clicked on it, then directly sent the document to the using an offline file. Don't rush me. I've delivered the goods. I don't even have my underwear. Father Wang typed. On the other side of the computer screen, the Lai Mingming was a little confused. What? Did you give me the entire manuscript repository? Father Wang was extremely agitated. That's right. Are you satisfied now? Lai Mingming was blank. He could see that Father Wang seemed to be in a bad mood, so he said weakly, Sorry, I don't think I've received it yet. Father Wang replied straight away. Word is very big, bear with it. Lai Mingming. Dumbfounded, he waited for the offline file to be transferred over as he wondered what on earth had happened to Father Wang. At the same time, he was also thinking about the situation of online literature writers nowadays, and wondering if he had been pressuring them to update too much. After all, at the very beginning, online literature writers had been updating weekly, then came the era of 2,000 daily updates, which slowly developed into 4,000, 6,000, 8,000, and now the most outrageous era of 20,000 and more. Indeed, it's too much. Lai Mingming sighed. He felt that he should be concerned about the health of his writers, and planned to find time to go to the Wang family's small villa to see how Father Wang was doing. At the same time, Father Wang was already fully armed. He was extremely worried about Wang Nuan's safety, so he and Mother Wang put on the latest enchanted long johns that Wang Ling had left behind. They called over some of the family's powerful enchanted gremlins and had them turn into human forms. The whole group was ready to set off from the villa with a bang. At that moment, a cute and mischievous little girl appeared at the entrance of the Wang family's small villa. She had a popsicle in her mouth and looked as cute as a doll. Protect my lord. Lord Ma immediately realized that something wasn't right and shielded Father and Mother Wang behind him. He could sense that the girl in front of him was also a descendant of the dragon race, and her rank wasn't low. Chapter 1900. Thinking about it carefully, Father Wang suddenly realized that this seemed to be the second time someone had directly come looking for trouble with him and Mother Wang. AI, who had they offended? Didn't they just give birth to 2 nuclear bombs? Did they have to be targeted like this? Father Wang sighed endlessly in his heart. He vaguely recalled the last time Wang Nuan had been born, when the 1% of the grave gods had come looking for trouble with him. At the time, Immortal Toya had been present to help deliver Wang Nuan. In the end, because Wang Ling had enlightened him with his Qilin arm, the 1% of the grave gods had been directly suppressed. Little Kato? And Little Eagle? Are you there? Father Wang called out in his heart. Because his left and right hands had been enlightened before, Father Wang had been a little out of his mind for a while, and Mother Wang had straightaway taught him a lesson, which had also resulted in his left and right hands being sealed. Now that they were in danger again, Father Wang didn't know if his call could wake them up again. After calling out twice and realizing that there was no response in his mind, he couldn't help feeling a little disappointed and nervous. There were many gremlins enlightened by Wang Ling in the Wang family's small villa, and with Lord Ma at the helm, there shouldn't be any problems with their safety. But now, without the help of his left and right hands, Father Wang still felt that the current situation was very unpredictable. At the same time, Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal was also paying attention to the old Wang family's plight. Crispy Noodles was keeping an eye on Wang Ling's situation, and Wang Nuan and Lung Ming were there for Wang Muyu's situation. In this situation, the old Wang family might also be targeted. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal felt that given the strength of these 2 old seniors of the Wang family, no evil demon would be able to leap over the old Wang family's lightning pool. But as the head of a sect, Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal still wanted to take a look. On one hand, he wanted to see if there was anything he could do to help, and on the other hand he felt that this was a very rare opportunity to learn from them at close range. He had already carried out many missions with Wang Ling before, and each time he could feel that he was a little closer to achieving great Dao. This time, the opportunity to watch the battle at close range had been provided by the two experienced seniors of the old Wang family, so the learning effect was naturally extraordinary. Furthermore, grenade-throwing senior immortal was very considerate in setting up a temporary lockdown in the name of Battle Sect, to ensure that Father Wang and Mother Wang's fight wouldn't be watched by ordinary cultivators. Grenade-throwing senior immortal was well aware that the old Wang family had always kept a low profile. Sect Master, the surroundings have been sealed. Our battle sect has sent a total of 300 gold core cultivators under the command of 20 nascent soul outer sect elders, and 5 deity transformation stage peak elders to completely seal off the wasteland. They're using the name of the sect's maneuver, but they've only applied for 10 hours. After 10 hours we'll have to leave, Klein said from the side. As the chief commander of the United Front Department, he could be considered one of the few foreign talents in battle sect working in Huaxiao Nation. Grenade-throwing senior immortal felt that he was a very capable and trustworthy person. It won't take that long. That's enough. Grenade-throwing senior immortal nodded in satisfaction, then said, "Withdraw first, Kun. Leave the rest to me." "That girl isn't simple. Sect Master, be careful." Kun nodded, then swiftly retreated on his spirit sword. According to their previous plan, after sealing off the area, they would directly retreat 150 li away and set up a barrier 300 li away. But as the leader of the dragon bloodline, it was naturally impossible for Yan Fu, who was naturally the leader of the dragon bloodline, to not sense this. She licked her popsicle with a smile on her face. Are these small fries around you also your people?" Father Wang knew that Yan Fu was probably talking about people from Battle Sect. Although Father Wang was very weak, grenade throwing had been a guest at Old Wang's house time and time again. So Father Wang could still sense his aura. But because their opponent was a dragon bloodline, Father Wang didn't place all his hopes on grenade-throwing senior immortal. However, he could still guess grenade-throwing senior immortal's purpose for this trip. One was to protect him, and the other was to learn. Apart from these two reasons, he couldn't think of any other reason. But the problem was that he really didn't have anything to learn. Father Wang's heart was on the verge of collapse. He didn't know when grenade-throwing senior immortal, and some other people in the cultivation world, had started to regard him as a big shot. He was clearly just a very ordinary body refinement cultivator. "You little doll, your tone is very arrogant. With me here, you won't be able to touch a hair on my old master's head." At this critical moment, Lord Ma took the initiative to step forward. He still had that old-fashioned look on his face, and the curled mustache at the corner of his lips gave people a feeling of power without being angry. His pure white Taoist robe made him look especially sage-like in such a tense situation. Of course, the most impressive thing about him was the wood grain waistcoat on his neck. It was a gift from the cosmic god tree himself after he had fallen in love with it, and it gave off the scent of wood. Without saying anything else, Yan Fu made her move the moment she finished eating the popsicle in her hand. The shadow of a fire dragon surged behind her. Lord Ma and the goblins who had been enlightened by the Wang family were waiting solemnly. Lord Ma and Bet Immortal, the two most senior goblins of the Wang family, each carried Father Wang and Mother Wang on their shoulders. The ground in front of the Wang family's villa instantly exploded as their feet left the ground. It shattered with a rumble, and turned into a roiling lake of fire from which lava surged and gave off astonishing energy. The surrounding ground had all collapsed, leaving only the Wang family's small villa alone in this area, like an isolated island. Wang Ling had enlightened the entire villa, so Father and Mother Wang weren't worried about any property damage at all. They were just a little astonished by Yan Fu's ability. She looked like a very young girl, but her attacks were so decisive and ruthless that she directly disintegrated the ground under her feet. What an astonishing aura. Grenade-throwing senior immortal frowned. Actually, he had a third reason for coming here this time, which was to collect accurate data on the dragon descendants at close range. Although Earth had already been upgraded and the realms above true immortal had been liberated, the speed at which the dragon descendants were regenerating was too fast. If they didn't have a good countermeasure, Apart from those hidden immemorial beings, few cultivators on Earth would be able to compete with these dragon descendants who had the advantage of bloodlines. It was obvious that Lord Ma had never expected Yan Fu to be so troublesome. He wanted to get serious, but it was a little inconvenient with Father Wang sitting on his shoulder. "Old master, it doesn't seem convenient for me to fight with you on my back. Do you want to enter my body?" "No." Father Wang refused straight away and confidently. Lord Ma sighed, a little disappointed on his face. He had clearly already cleaned up his internal environment. Because of the cosmic god tree, the reserves in his body had long since been emptied out as fertilizer. Right now his body was very clean. But his old master was too willful. He couldn't get over this psychological obstacle, which gave him a headache. Chapter 1901. Lord Ma knew better than anyone that his body was now very clean. Since falling in love with the cosmic god tree, he had gained a girlfriend who liked to clean, and he looked a lot younger. He was already the oldest gremlin in Old Wang's family, and Little Sheep had always called him uncle with white hair and a ruddy complexion, which touched Lord Ma very much. At that moment, as one of the few furniture gremlins in Old Wang's family who had been strengthened by version 3.0's enchantment spell, Lord Ma abruptly changed into a very coquettish Western-style tuxedo the next second to highlight his status as an elder in the world of enchanted gremlins. "Bed Immortal, I'll leave old master to you. I'll go beat this girl back." As Lord Ma said this, he directly teleported Father Wang to Bed Immortal, who was carrying Father Wang and Mother Wang on each shoulder, and was very steady. He and Lord Ma were old partners. In this situation, there was no need for them to say much. Just a look was enough for them to work together tacitly. "What a joke. Do you think a gremlin you created with magic can contend with us, the descendants of dragons?" Yanrua giggled. She found it inconceivable that an enchanted piece of furniture could actually speak so confidently and want to fend off a descendant of dragons with noble blood. "Arrogant girl, so what if you're a descendant of dragons? My master has never cared about trash like you." Putting his hands behind his back, Lord Ma looked disdainfully at her, the tail of his Western-style tuxedo fluttering in the windless air. Yanrua couldn't take it anymore to be looked down upon by an enchanted toilet. In any case, she was a descendant of dragons and didn't approve of this kind of matchup. To actually let a toilet be her opponent, this was looking down on the dragon clan too much. "You're courting death." Yanrua instantly flew into a rage and spat out dragon flames. This was the divine fire of the dragon clan, which alternated between purple and black, and had a frightening temperature. The moment it was spat out, the flaming lake below immediately resonated, and several fire dragons soared into the sky from the lake to form a pincer attack on Lord Ma. Lord Ma's face was as calm as an ancient well, but he was secretly astonished at Yanrua's methods. She clearly looked like a very gentle and quiet girl, but her moves were all large-scale destructive attacks. Although he was the most experienced gremlin in the Wang family, Lord Ma still knew nothing about the grand occasion of the Dragon Clan. This battle was also a lesson for Lord Ma himself. However, Lord Ma didn't panic in the slightest. He quickly dodged. Although the formation of the fire dragon was sudden, it still gave Lord Ma some time to react. The rest of the Wang family's spiritual monsters hid in the house and watched. With the entire villa surrounded by the flaming lake, the temperature in the house rose by a lot. The spiritual monsters looked at the doomsday-like scene outside through the window, and all of them felt a lingering fear. The dragon race was truly too frightening. There were not many enlightened monsters in the Wang family who could fight against a dragon descendant of this level. If it were them, they would probably be burned to ashes immediately after coming into contact with the dragon race's divine fire. Just like Jingzhe, Yanrua had also grown over the past few days, becoming more ferocious than before. As Lord Ma fought, he also felt that it was a pity. If such a powerful ability could be used to benefit the human cultivation world, it would be a wonderful way of symbiosis. He didn't understand why the dragon race had to pursue the mission of restoring the glory of the past. Since they could come back to life from their hearts, it was not impossible to walk a path of peaceful coexistence and symbiosis. With a bang, Lord Ma dodged sideways to avoid a mountain-sized fire. Yen Rua's spiritual power seemed to be endless, and she didn't care about the problem of consumption when casting spells. She sprinkled her dragon breath and spiritual power in large amounts, burning the ground in front of her into a fiery red. The nearby ground was all cracked and shattered on the spot, forming a dry abyss. Do you only know how to hide? Toilet bowl. Yen Rua taunted. She didn't regard Lord Ma as her opponent at all, and was just releasing her temper willfully. When Lord Ma heard this, his face suddenly became serious. He felt that this little dragon girl really needed to be disciplined. As the head of the goblins enlightened by the Wang family, he had always considered himself to be elegant and easygoing. When he had dodged these attacks earlier, he had planned to use verbal admonition to make Yen Rua surrender. But as it turned out, Lord Ma felt that he had been thinking too much. Sure enough, verbal evasion didn't work for everyone. As the head of the family, he now had to teach Yen Rua a lesson. Whoosh! At that moment, Yen Rua spat out the dragon god fire again, and her pink skirt glowed under the resonance power of her dragonkin bloodline. She intensified the power of the dragon god fire again, and this time, it directly hit Lord Ma head-on and completely engulfed him. This time, Lord Ma didn't choose to dodge, but directly opened his mouth to take Yen Rua's dragon god fire. And with a terrifying devouring power, he formed a wonderful cave inside his body to continuously suck in the dragon god fire. Everyone was shocked. He had taken on the dragon god fire head-on. Furthermore, he was even devouring the dragon god fire. This was simply heaven-defying. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal was horrified when he saw this from a distance. He knew of Lord Ma's background, but he had never thought that he would actually be so strong. No wonder old Senior Wang hadn't made a move. It turned out that he had already anticipated Lord Ma's strength. Could Lord Ma alone resist it? As expected of old Senior Wang, grenade-throwing Senior Immortal sighed in his heart at Father Wang and Mother Wang's formidable strength. It seemed that the dragonkin wasn't strong enough for them to make a move. Although it was very strong, the goblins enlightened by the old Wang family were already enough to deal with it. I don't believe you can keep swallowing. Like Jingza, Yen Rua had a kind of magical arrogance. She looked down on Lord Ma to begin with, and it was even harder for her to accept the fact that her dragon god fire was ineffective. In the next moment, she increased the intensity of the flames and tried to use the dragon god fire to blow up Lord Ma's internal space. But what Yen Rua herself hadn't expected was that when she activated the dragon god fire, Lord Ma's body instead underwent a new change. Lord Ma's black swallow-tailed coat was visibly changing as the divine fire of the dragon clan continued to devour it. Not only that, but even the color of his eyes and hair had changed. His black tuxedo turned a gradual black-gold color, and his hair and curly goatee turned pure gold. Furthermore, Lord Ma's aura was even stronger than before. As he continued to absorb the dragon god fire, he became stronger than before. Uncle Ma's aura seems to have increased. I know. This is fourth gear. Fourth gear. The enlightened goblins discussed among themselves. Oh, it's version 4.0 of the enlightened spell. It needs a special mechanism to trigger the upgrade. Little Sheep said softly. Now Uncle Ma is already a version 4.0 enlightened goblin. At the same time, Father and Mother Wang heard Sheep's voice. Realization dawned on them, and they were speechless. Who could have thought? Lord Ma had actually evolved into a quenched toilet bowl while fighting the dragonkin. Chapter 1902. Wang Ling had planned to enter version 4.0 in advance, and it was clear that he had already foreseen this battle for Lord Ma. So he hadn't used his King's Eye fire to temper Lord Ma's body. Hateful? Who would have thought that he would actually be used instead? And used the Dragon Clan fire to successfully temper Lord Ma's body. At that moment, Lord Ma's aura was even stronger after entering version 4.0. His whole body gave off an astonishing aura, and at the same time, 10 vortexes surged up behind him. These were grotto heaven spaces that could devour everything and had formidable destructive power. Everything that got close to the grotto heaven vortexes would collapse as if they were sucked into a black hole. Hateful? Feeling the immense pressure, she spread her dragon wings, and as they flapped, they formed dozens of fire tornadoes that rolled forward. Boom! But Lord Ma just raised his hand, and the 10 grotto heaven vortexes behind him moved in unison. Like magic balls, they spiraled forward with a kind of agile power. Before the fire tornadoes could get close to Lord Ma's body, the grotto heaven vortexes had already completely disintegrated and swallowed them up without leaving a trace. So strong. Grenade-throwing senior immortal was shocked. He admired Father Wang more and more, and thought that everything had been within his calculations. He had actually thought of using the dragon clan fire to temper Lord Ma's body, increasing his overall strength by several times over. Hateful's attack had been completely ineffective. These 10 grotto heaven vortexes were like an airtight barrier that firmly protected Lord Ma. With a wave of his hand, the flaming lake under his feet also began to be absorbed by the 10 grotto heaven vortexes, creating a magnificent scene like a dragon sucking in water. In just one short moment, Lord Ma had already sucked the flaming lake dry. However, the scorched ground had already been reduced to scorched earth, and not a single blade of grass grew within a radius of 100 li. Lord Ma had thought of teaching Hateful a lesson. He had wanted to teach Hateful a lesson and beat her back. But now he didn't think so. Since it was Hateful? Since this was a mistake made by Hateful, he had to at the very least capture this girl alive and suppress her here, so that she could plant trees and restore the ecology of this area. Buzz. In an instant, his body glowed with golden light, and the 10 grotto heavens moved together to form a cage. Hateful was suppressed. The moment he was surrounded by the 10 grotto heavens, he felt like he was going to explode. Her eyes widened in fear. She took out the dragon descendant weapon, the burning heaven chain hammer, which was a radiant grade dragon descendant weapon, but in the end, it could not stop the grotto heaven from advancing. After taking out the chain hammer, the entire artifact was engulfed by the heavenly passage. She could not believe that she would actually be defeated by a monster. Everything happened too suddenly. The instant the 10 grotto heavens merged, Yendi, and Yendi disappeared. His body was engulfed and disappeared into the void. Uncle Ma didn't kill her, did he? Little Sheep asked. No. Lord Ma shook his head. I still want her to help us clean up the courtyard and rectify the ecology nearby. Everything was burned by her. She should pay for it. As he said that, Lord Ma opened his palm, and a fiery red dragon scale lay quietly in his palm. Was he disguising himself with the dragon scale? It was plucked during the duel. Then he snapped his fingers and sent the dragon scale to the distant shore. The person who received the dragon scale was none other than Peng Shiren. At the moment, Peng Shiren's real body was playing chess with the grave god. Facing the dragon scale that had suddenly appeared on the chessboard mountain, Peng Shiren's expression changed. In the past few days, in order to escape from the imprisonment of the Tao ancestor Wang's Dharma Laksana, he had thought of countless ways. In the end, he had used the cicada shedding carapace technique to escape from Yendi's side. He had also sought the protection of the grave god and Baizha. Moreover, it was Baizha who had thought of this method to escape from the very beginning. Peng Shiren knew that he was not strong enough to be a match for Yendi, so he decided to join Baizha's side. He left his body and half of his soul behind. With Baizha's help, he guided the other half of his soul into this brand new body. This was a new body that Baizha had specially created for him. It was a body of a dragon descendant created from the dragon bone gene of the dark devouring dragon, which was now under Peng Shiren's control. Peng Shiren had thought that his cicada shedding carapace technique was flawless. Once he fully adapted to the body of one of the 3 great leaders of the dragon clan, he would be able to find Yendi again, and even Wang Ling to directly carry out his revenge. But now, faced with Yendi's dragon scale, which had suddenly teleported in front of him, he was suddenly stupefied. Why do you want to give me Yendi's dragon scale? Peng Shiren furrowed his brows. He had also been the one to propose the plan to lure Wang Ling and the others into the eternal past. He had thought that Wang Ling wouldn't find out about everything he had done in the dark. But now Lord Ma's long-distance teleportation instantly made Peng Shiren's heartstrings taut. Don't be too nervous. I thought this was just a test. Your appearance and aura have all changed. Now, you are a new generation dragon descendant with the dark devouring dragon gene. Plus, you have the power of the great old ones. which is the perfect combination of great old ones and dragons. As long as we cultivate you, you will be one of the strongest war machines in our camp. The grave god mused. Pinching the dragon scale between 2 fingers, he frowned slightly. Loathing? His defeat was within his expectations. There's no need to worry too much. The Wang family isn't ordinary to begin with. Even I can't deal with them. How can she do it on her own? So you did it on purpose? Asked Peng Shiren. Jingza and Loathing? There is some kind of bond between them. If Loathing is arrested? On the contrary, Jingza will be more determined to stand on our side. The grave god said. He was already wavering. After this disaster, Mr. Bai and I are sure that he will give up all his fantasies and become one of us. Hearing this, Peng Shiren instantly understood. But there was still one thing he couldn't figure out. What on earth is going on with Wang Muyu? Bringing Wang Muyu back is indeed part of our plan, and nothing has changed. It's just that Mr. Bai didn't expect the newborn Wang Yuan to be so strong. The grave god laughed. He was now in the human form of Sothith. His body was covered in bubbles, and he looked like a bunch of shiny purple grapes. When he laughed, the bubbles on his body would float up, explode and reform. Yes, that girl is like a god of war. I feel that we won't be able to snatch her away normally. But her brother is even more terrifying. It wasn't easy for us to trap him in the Eons. I know, said the grave god. This is indeed a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, but it's unrealistic to force it now. Why don't we plant some seeds for the little dragon man while he's not here? Let him find us himself. Chapter 1903. Yen Luo had been captured, and Jing Zhe had also been severely injured. He spat out dragon blood like a drowning dog on his last breath, and completely lost the dignity of a dragon descendant. Lung Ming melted his back, and took a lot of dragon spine blood from his back. This caused Jing Zhe to feel incomparable pain, and he kept screaming in pain. There was no doubt that Jing Zhe had been completely defeated, and it all looked like a foregone conclusion. Wang Muyu, only you know what your surname is. His mouth was very stubborn, and he completely ignored Lung Ming's torture as he spoke in a weak voice. Those eyes looked at Wang Muyu, and for a brief moment, Wang Muyu felt an indelible impact on his soul. Look at how these human cultivators treat our dragon clan. You shouldn't help the wicked do evil and acknowledge a traitor as your father. You talk too much. Lung Ming raised his hand and punched Jing Zhe in the back. The ground immediately caved in, creating a huge pit. Dust flew up in all directions, and the huge impact directly shook the core world to the point where it seemed like it was going to collapse. The stability of the core world structure was closely related to its owner's condition. If the owner's body and mind collapsed, the core world would also disintegrate. It was hard to imagine that Wang Yuan and Lung Ming, master and servant, had joined forces to directly wreak havoc in someone else's core world, as if they were the masters of the core world. In the next second, the scene of the world falling apart changed. Wang Muyu noticed that they had already evacuated from Jing Zhe's core world. The surroundings returned to normal, and Jing Zhe had also disappeared along with the core world. Did he run away? Lung Ming had actually been on guard against Jing Zhe escaping, so he had been keeping an eye on him. He hadn't expected the other party to escape so smoothly. It was clear that Bai Zhe and the grave god had helped him in this. After their previous failures, both of them were undoubtedly victims who had been mercilessly whipped. Since they were victims, they had to have done some research on how to escape when they couldn't win. Lung Ming was a little vexed because he couldn't tell what the other party had done. Little girl Nguan, on the other hand, had a calm expression on her face. She lay on Lung Ming's back and stretched out her soft hand to stroke Lung Ming's furry green hair. At the same time, she pinched his cute elf ears to comfort him. In their original plan, they hadn't planned to directly kill Jingza, and Wang Ling had arranged this scenario from the very beginning. As his younger sister, Wang Yuan didn't know what he was planning, but she would definitely fully support her brother's work. After obediently accepting Wang Yuan's consolation, Lung Ming calmed down a lot. Then he carried Wang Yuan on his back and walked to Wang Muyu. Oh, your body should be fine now, right? I'm fine. Auntie Nguan is too strong. She fed me a lot of pills. To be honest, Even now, Wang Muyu felt the blood in his body churning. Not only was his injury about to recover, he even felt that he was stronger than before, and was on the verge of a breakthrough. Lung Ming had obviously sensed this as well. He hurriedly asked, "We need to find a good place to break through. Do you want to go to the Mountain of Origins? You need to find a good place to break through. Do you want to go to the Backtrack Mountain? It's a place similar to a time-secret realm that Sword Master Ling set up. You can cultivate faster there, and it's isolated from the world." Wang Muyu thought for a while, then patted the dust off his body and stood up. "Then I'll have to trouble you, Brother Lung Ming." He had no reason to refuse such an invitation, and it was obvious that this was Wang Ling's idea. Wang Muyu felt that as a son, he had no reason not to listen to his old father. At the same time elsewhere, in front of the Prung family's main residence, East's great emperor, who had his eyes closed, suddenly opened them. In a foreign land he watched the ages. This was Wang Ling's method. Even if he was trapped in a different timeline at the moment, he could still clearly understand what he was concerned about. In the Wang family's villa, Wang Muyu's situation had stabilized. It could be said that the current overall arrangement and the overall direction of the script were all within Wang Ling's expectations. And Wang Ling had planned all of this a long time ago. It was just that the interlude of being trapped for eternity had forced Wang Ling to make some slight changes to his original plan. Fortunately, everything that had happened so far had gone according to plan, and had gone very smoothly. He just had to wait for Lotus Sun to see the young lady of the Prung family in front of him with peace of mind. Lotus Sun, dressed as a man, had already passed the Dao discussion and the talent show. Her beautiful swordsmanship had mesmerized everyone present for eternity. It was a swordsmanship that had never been seen before in eternity, and it was an eye-opener for everyone. Lotus Sun didn't even need to think of the moves herself. In her state of being one with the sword, Mysterious Sea led Lotus Sun through this gorgeous sword dance performance, as if he was leading her through a spirit sword waltz that no one else could see. Even the steward of the Prung family's main residence, who had always been domineering, was shocked. This kind of figure, and this kind of swordsmanship were definitely not something an ordinary tycoon could pull off. Coupled with the fact that she had used a Dao ancestor pill earlier, as well as the fact that he hadn't been able to find out Lotus Sun's background no matter what he did, he became even more curious about her identity. It seems that this Mr. Wang Rongxia is indeed not an ordinary person. It looks like there's going to be a show for today's matchmaking session. He will be the first person to see the young lady. The steward guessed. After all, he was the one who had received the gift, and he was now starting to speak up for Lotus Sunday. It was just that the final outcome was still very hard to predict. After all, it was the young lady of the Prung family who had set up this matchmaking session in the first place. Their young lady had an eccentric temperament, and even if she passed all the checkpoints, it was still possible that she would be eliminated in the end. Congratulations to Mr. Wang Rongxia for passing the second round. The next round is the martial arts competition. In this round, the young lady will personally test Mr. Wang. After the results of the second round were tabulated, the steward announced it on behalf of Lotus Sunday. Everyone at the scene and the onlookers on the street applauded. They were onlookers to join in on the fun, and thought that Lotus Sun's move would provide an excellent template for them to interview for a son-in-law in the future. In the side courtyard of the Prung family's main residence, Wang Ling and the others had the opportunity to observe the scene up close. When the headquarters of the Peng clan finished reporting the plan for the next level, a beautiful woman in a pinkish-white robe slowly walked out of the hall. She looked like an immortal. She was graceful and graceful. Her appearance was vaguely familiar, but it was not exactly the same. He could only sense that feeling from her brows and eyes. At first glance, Wang Ling could confirm that this person was undoubtedly Peng Shiren's younger sister, Peng Basin. Moreover, he felt as if he had seen it somewhere before. It had nothing to do with Peng Shiren, but in the real world, he felt as if he had seen it somewhere before. Chapter 1904. For some reason, Wang Ling felt that he had seen Peng Basin somewhere before. She had a particularly heroic and elegant air about her, and didn't give off the feeling of a gentle, refined, pretty daughter of a humble family like other girls. She looked like a very pleasant person. Her long white robe accentuated her figure perfectly, and she didn't wear any gaudy silk ribbons. She gave off a very different vibe from those female cultivators from ancient times. And it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that she was a peerless beauty. The moment Lotus Sun saw Peng Basin, she was a little stunned. She had never expected the legendary eldest miss of the Peng family to be like this. She didn't seem like a girl at all, and just like Wang Ling's intuition, she felt like she had seen this Miss Peng somewhere before. Young Master Wang. At that moment, Peng Basin's words interrupted Lotus Sun's thoughts. It was a very magnetic and very neutral voice. If you closed your eyes, you wouldn't be able to tell whether it was a man or a woman. Lotus Sun quickly came back to her senses. How would Miss Peng like to compete? As she asked this, she mentally prepared herself. Their purpose in coming here wasn't to propose marriage. The main point was to meet Peng Basin's older brother, Peng Shiren, and then carry out the follow-up plan. It was just that after this simple greeting, Lotus Sun suddenly had a bad feeling, and felt that this Peng Basin in front of her wasn't as simple as she seemed. Young Master Wang's swordsmanship is superb. I've also seen your sword dance just now. It's a unique swordsmanship. I've studied thousands of swordsmanship, but this is the first time I've seen young Master Wang's swordsmanship. She smiled, looking very modest. In terms of sword technique, I definitely can't compare to young Master Wang. Young Master Wang is very strong, and I think I'll be at a disadvantage if we compete. However, I mainly focus on cultivating spiritual swords, so before the competition, I have a presumptuous request. Miss Peng, please speak. Lotus Sun bowed politely. It's like this, I definitely can't beat young Master Wang. So I thought I'd pick one of young Master Wang's followers to fight on his behalf. If that person beats me, it'll be considered young Master Wang's victory. Pick one person. Lotus Sun was stunned. Never in her wildest dreams had she expected this result. Turning around, she saw that the people behind her were no longer people, but grenades, missiles and even nuclear bombs. Yes, no matter how useless the people behind her were, they were still a grenade. Drawing a grenade definitely wouldn't do. Lotus Sun felt that Miss Peng's strength was extraordinary, and the grenade would most likely lose. Thus, the best outcome was to draw a missile. For example, Wang Zhen, who was playing the role of the Holy Stone cult's Holy Maiden, or Zhang Zipei, who was playing Yi Run. Winning when their strength was similar was the most logical. As for the rest, Lotus Sun felt that all of them were undoubtedly nuclear bombs. Behind him were the 4 emperors of primordial era. No matter which one Peng Basin picked, it would be considered as winning the lottery. If they were to fight, she would have to act. Furthermore, she had to act as if she had won by a hair's breadth, and she couldn't win too obviously. What's wrong? Why is young Master Wang so hesitant? Are you not confident in the people you brought? At that moment, Peng Basin continued to provoke him with words. This is also a test. Generally speaking, the strength of the accompanying servants is a reflection of their background. I will naturally comply with Miss Peng's suggestion. At this point, Lotus Sun had no choice but to play along. She silently looked back at Wang Ling, hoping that he would step back a little and not stand too close to the front. After all, what she was most worried about was that Wang Ling would be chosen. Because even nuclear bombs had different grades. In theory, Wang Ling couldn't even be considered a nuclear bomb. It was basically the legendary dark matter. It was too unstable. If he made a move, he might directly raise the entire planet to the ground. On the other side, Wang Ling immediately understood what Lotus Sun meant. After all, he and Lotus Sun had gone through several missions together, and they still had this bit of tacit understanding in their eyes. But he had only taken half a step back when Peng Basin called out his name. Sir, don't step back, it's you. Wang Ling. As soon as he said this, Lotus Sun and everyone else instantly broke out in a sweat. Although everyone already knew that the plot of the Eternal World was basically crooked and director Wang Ling had to manually correct it, no one had expected that director Wang, who had been standing behind the scenes, would actually take the field himself. Are you sure, Miss Peng? Lotus Sun confirmed. She hoped that Peng Basin would suddenly change her mind and choose someone else, but in the end, this Miss Peng shook her head with a smile on her face and said, I usually like to play chess. And it said that there are no regrets when you play. Of course there are no regrets when you choose someone. It's this brother. I saw him step back, and it looks like he doesn't have much confidence in himself, so I chose him. At this point, Lotus Sun had completely figured it out. Peng Basin actually had no intention of marrying him, which was why she had chosen him. But since she had no intention of marrying him, why did she make such a big fuss about inviting all sorts of son-in-law to come knocking on her door? Was she waiting for the one she loved to appear? She didn't understand. But since Peng Basin had chosen Wang Ling of her own accord, Lotus Sun could only silently wish Peng Basin good luck in her heart. In any case, it was just a competition. It was fine as long as Wang Ling didn't marry this woman. This was what she thought in her heart, and she very cooperatively stepped aside. On the other side, Wang Ling also quietly and obediently stepped forward. Since the arrow was already knocked on the bowstring, he had no choice but to release it. Wang Ling wasn't flustered at all. After all, he was only possessing this body, and East Great Emperor was still in charge of the control of his body. East Great Emperor himself could freely control his strength, and there was no situation where he couldn't suppress his battle strength. But as an emperor, even East Great Emperor himself wasn't very confident. He stayed in the imperial palace all year round to deal with all kinds of important matters, and the people around him were all first-class experts. Although this Miss Peng looked very extraordinary, in the end, she was just a young miss of an aristocratic family. He didn't know anything about her specific strength, and didn't know where to start. Senior Wang, if the situation doesn't look good, you have to pull me back. Seeing that Wang Ling had returned control of the body to him, East Great Emperor immediately understood that this meant that he was going to make a move. Before he officially made his move, he said this in his heart. However, he received Wang Ying's ruthless reply. I'm very sorry, I only give people buffs, not attenuate them. East Great Emperor. Buff? What do you mean? Wang Ying sighed. It's a buff spell. East Great Emperor. Very well, then Senior shouldn't act rashly. I'll see how it goes. Helpless, East Great Emperor sighed, and then directly took out a spirit sword from his emperor's treasure chest. This was already the worst of all the spirit swords he could take out. However, when the Great East Emperor took it out, everyone at the scene revealed a shocked expression. Royal King Sword? Isn't this the legendary spirit sword? Chapter 1905. It's actually the Royal King Sword. Peng Shiren sat on a wide bench in a dark underground room deep within the Peng family's headquarters, sipping tea as he looked at the scene projected by the magic ball. He was able to see the entire scene of Peng Basin marrying Peng Basin. Logically speaking, as her elder brother, he should have helped his younger sister choose her husband. However, Peng Shiren felt that there was no need for that at the moment. His younger sister was merely a tool that could be used at a crucial moment to verify the path of cultivation he had chosen. Furthermore, she was a consumable that could be discarded at any time after being used. This had always been Peng Shiren's opinion since he was young. Furthermore, he despised those who protected his younger sister like she was the apple of their eyes. At this moment, he stared at the image projected by the magic ball in front of him, and his boredom finally piqued his interest. Is there still no result? A black-robed attendant stood at the side. His voice had aged, and his strength was extraordinary. He was no weaker than the Emperor's guards. Master, we've already done our best to investigate, but we still haven't found Wang Rongxia's true identity. Then I understand. Peng Shiren nodded. He seemed to have understood something. How interesting. They came to propose marriage, and even got a fake identity. It seems that their goal isn't simple. They're probably not just here to marry Basin. Master suspects that their identities are fake? The black-robed guard was clearly surprised by this deduction. There doesn't seem to be any other reasonable explanation, Peng Shiren smiled. Our Peng family's influence is spread across the 4 regions. We have spies in all the regions governed by the 4 emperors. If Wang Rongxia was a famous member of the royal family, there's no way our Peng family wouldn't have noticed her. Of course, this is only my personal guess. It's only after she took out the Royal King's sword that I confirmed my suspicions. The black-robed guard bowed and asked, if this servant may be so bold as to ask, What's wrong with the Royal King Sword? The Royal King Sword is a legendary sword with a very special origin. In theory, only the 4 emperors possess it. But now, it's actually in the hands of a servant. Don't you find it strange? Also look at this servant. Although his clothing is standard, it should have been specially packaged. He doesn't look anything like a servant. Peng Shiren analyzed the situation as he sipped on his tea. I've heard that the 4 martial monarchs are wary of the Peng clan's development. He sent people to test the waters several times. The 4 emperors gathering this time is actually a very good opportunity for them to communicate. At the same time, this is something that my Peng family is especially concerned about. However, if they have a secret meeting before the 4 emperors gathering, we won't know. Secret meeting. The black-robed guard revealed a look of astonishment. He could not believe this at all. This shouldn't be right. It should be known that not long ago, the West Great Emperor and the East Great Emperor had just fought a fierce battle. Because of this, the affiliated royal families, large, medium and small clans, as well as the rogue cultivators of the 2 regions had a huge conflict. But now, Peng Shiren suddenly made such a bold assumption. He believed that Wang Rongxia's true identity was a perfect fake identity carefully crafted by the 4 emperors after a secret meeting. Such a guess was indeed bold. However, after the black-robed guard pondered over this speculation, he felt that it was not entirely impossible. However, it was difficult to explain why the 2 great emperors, who were eager to fight the moment they saw each other, would suddenly shake hands and start to target the Peng clan together. Then, Master, should we chase them out? There's no need for that. Peng Shiren shook his head. They're already here, and they even dared to use a fake identity. Although I don't know how many great emperors were involved in crafting this fake identity, I think it's very interesting. Moreover, this servant chosen by Bateson seems to be the personal guard of a great emperor. He's quite powerful. I know that Bateson doesn't want to marry, so she must win this competition. If she's not confident of winning, she'll have to use the thing that I gave her. Then Peng Shiren's lips curled up. His sinister expression revealed a malicious smile. On the other side, the inner courtyard of the Peng family's huge headquarters had already been set up. This was originally a place for the Peng family to cultivate, and it was very spacious. Wang Ling looked around and saw that it was actually as big as 20 football fields, and all kinds of terrain had been created inside. Deserts, lakes, forests, cliffs in order to satisfy the Peng family's cultivation needs for different spirit roots. Everything had been set up here. The Peng family's wealth was indeed astonishing for a single training field to be this big. Furthermore, this was just one of the cultivation fields in the Peng family's headquarters. The total area of the Peng family's headquarters was indeed unimaginable. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it was a replica of an imperial palace. In some sense, Wang Ling felt that it was even more imposing than the imperial palaces of the 4 emperors. Peng Basin was already ready for battle. She stood on top of a stone pillar on a very high rockery, dressed in a white robe and holding the smelt bone sword in her hand. Her bai bone was also not an ordinary object. It was an object created by a famous refiner in the ancient times. It had a strong ductility and was a spirit sword that could be extended and contracted. When it was used, it could be like a python that could swallow mountains and rivers and sweep away thousands of soldiers, or it could be like a spirit snake that could twist and turn and be flexible. It was a spirit sword with a very strong comprehensive performance. But everyone knew that all powerful spirit swords came from the Sword King world, which was still in its infancy in ancient times. At that time, the sword spirit of the smelt bone sword already had a ranking in the Sword King world. In some sense, it could be considered one of the ancestors of swords. It was just that as the Sword King world's spirit swords became more and more diverse, the smelt bone sword gradually declined. Based on the current ranking of swords, the smelt bone sword couldn't even enter the top 1,000. That was to say, in a normal match, Lotus Sun's mysterious sea could indeed beat Peng Basin and her smelt bone. But if it was the ancient spirit sword that was on the same timeline against the smelt bone, in this period, the smelt bone was still a very powerful ancestor of swords. Are you ready, Mr. Servant? Peng Basin smiled lightly. The next second she moved. Staring at the body of the East Great Emperor, She directly slashed at him from a strange angle. This kind of power was even more terrifying than that of a python. It was the power of a flood dragon. As it swept over, it stirred up mist and ice crystals all over the sky. As it swept over, everything in its path froze inch by inch. Did she cultivate in both ice and water magic? The East Great Emperor didn't even frown. He didn't even have the intention of summoning the sword spirit. He swung his sword at the trajectory of the smelt bone. There was a buzzing sound. Under the blade of the sword, the East Great Emperor's power alone burst into a dazzling ray of sunlight. In this brief moment, Peng Shiren suddenly stood up from his chair. He didn't know whether it was an illusion or not. Although it was only for a very short moment. He felt as if he had seen a Mahamayuri flying in the air, emitting endless light and heat. Chapter 1906. The faintly discernible Mahamayuri's Dharma form only appeared for a brief moment. Under the blazing sunlight, it disappeared in the blink of an eye. Peng Basin couldn't see the image of the Dharma form, but Peng Shiren, who was watching from the shadows, could see it clearly. His realm was higher than Peng Basin's, and he had been observing the battlefield in secret. When East Great Emperor had used this sword technique called 10,000 Li Red, his eyes had instantly widened, and his extremely intelligent mind had also come to a standstill at that moment. Peng Shiren actually had some doubts in his heart. He didn't know if he had seen wrong. Wisdom King Dharma form. This was a supreme Dharma virtual body that East Great Emperor had only recently used, and no one else should be able to use it. Could this person be East Great Emperor himself? It couldn't be. Peng Shiren couldn't believe that an emperor-level figure would willingly serve as a servant in order to put on a good show. How was this possible? Peng Shiren's mind was filled with countless thoughts for a moment. After all, this was just his wishful thinking. If the other party really was East Great Emperor himself, he shouldn't have deliberately made such a mistake for Wang Ling to see. So after careful consideration, Wang Ling felt that he was wrong. This person definitely wasn't East Great Emperor. If he was, there was no way he would make such a low-level mistake. As for how to explain the sudden appearance of the Wisdom King Dharma form, Wang Ling thought that this servant had to be East Great Emperor's personal guard, so it wouldn't be strange for him to have learned a few moves under his influence. Furthermore, from the fact that the Dharma form had disappeared in the blink of an eye, it could also be seen that summoning the Wisdom King Dharma form just now had just been a fluke. A supreme Dharma form like this consumed a lot of spirit power. Staying in the air for one more second would consume an ocean of spirit energy, which ordinary people wouldn't be able to withstand. Even if they had learned this move, they would only be able to make a slight appearance like this. This was an intense clash of thoughts from Peng Shiren's inner world. What Peng Shiren didn't know was that this Wisdom King Dharma form just now was in fact a flaw that East Great Emperor had deliberately revealed. At the same time, this was also a secret instruction from Wang Ling. He predicted that Peng Shiren must be observing the battle nearby, so he deliberately let the Great East Emperor reveal a flaw. With Peng Shiren's self-proclaimed intelligence and suspicious nature, he would definitely think of the problem from an angle that deviated from the truth. If he had concealed himself well from the beginning to the end and won against Peng Basin flawlessly, it would be easier for problems to arise. On the other side of the training ground, Peng Basin frowned slightly. This was because this servant was much stronger than she had imagined. With just a single sword technique, he was able to neutralize her preemptive attack. If she did not treat this person seriously and go all out, she was afraid that she would not be able to send this person away. She raised her spiritual power in an attempt to launch a new attack. In the next moment, the East Great Emperor felt the ground beneath his feet begin to shake, causing an earthquake. The tide of snakes coming from all directions attracted the attention of everyone present. They were small elemental snakes summoned by various elemental energies. Under the command of the sword spirit of the Woodsbone sword, they were moving forward at an astonishing speed. Carrying their own elemental energies, they surged forward and charged forward. The momentum of their charge was enough to make people shudder. This was also a scene that made the fearful onlookers collapse. These biting cold little snakes were too frightening. They gathered forward at an astonishing speed with a terrible fierceness. With the advantage of their flexible bodies, they advance forward, ignoring the terrain and surging forward from all directions. In an instant, the first batch of snakes had already arrived beneath the East Great Emperor's feet. It had to be said that Peng Basin's ability to trigger a beast tide was indeed amazing. This was an elemental transformation technique. She used the ability of the spirit sword to transform the water and ice spirit roots that she cultivated, thus attempting to restrain all elements. These elemental snakes surging from all directions each had the ability to devour the corresponding elemental spirit energy. In other words, no matter what method the East Great Emperor used next, it would be neutralized. Unfortunately, Peng Basin had missed one point, and that was that the person she was fighting now was the emperor of a territory. Perhaps this trick would have a miraculous effect on others, but as a great emperor, the East Great Emperor had seen all kinds of situations. Playing this kind of trick in front of the Great Emperor was like waving a broadsword in front of Guan Yu. Under normal circumstances, the East Great Emperor would immediately use the vermilion bird fire shield to firmly wrap himself in all directions like an eggshell. But now that he was facing a situation where the elements were devoured, he could not use this trick so easily. Of course, he could also directly release the Supreme Peacock Wisdom King Dharma form to protect himself. It was a sacred flame that was above the 5 elements of fire, and ordinary elemental devouring spells could not resist it at all. But the East Great Emperor thought that he was playing the role of a servant now. Since he was a servant, he naturally had to act like a servant. Therefore, just as the East Great Emperor was about to be surrounded by the snake tide, he moved again and waved the royal sword in his hand. At first, the speed of the sword dance was very slow, but gradually, the sword in his hand sped up and formed a shadow. Without any spells or the power of the spirit sword itself, the sword chi that was formed when he waved the sword quickly formed a barrier made of ordinary sword chi under the high speed of the flying sword. This speed was really too fast. Peng Basin was surprised. She used her naked eyes to capture it, but she could not follow the rhythm at all. She was horrified as she stared at the elemental snakes that had entangled the East Great Emperor being beheaded. At this moment, the East Great Emperor stood in the middle of the battlefield like a high-speed yet ordinary meat grinder. He controlled the stalemate of the beast tide with his own sword chi alone. What was the background of this servant? On the other side of the secret room, Peng Shiren's expression was cold, and he no longer had the indifference he had at the beginning. His eyes flickered. Ever since the moment the faintly discernible Wisdom King Dharma form appeared, he had not spoken for a long time. The secret room was filled with a cold air. Master, Miss seems to be in a stalemate. The background of this servant is definitely not simple, the black-robed guard said. Trash. Peng Shiren snorted. He was a little angry. He did not know what Peng Basin was doing. In this situation, it was obvious that she was no match for this servant, but even now, she had not thought of using the item he had given her. That was the Supreme Saint Dharma treasure. As long as she used it at the crucial moment, she would definitely win. But the prerequisite was that there would be a certain degree of sequelae. Moreover, even Peng Shiren himself did not know what the sequelae were. He had given the Dharma treasure to Peng Basin in the hope of using his sister's body to experiment. In the end, Peng Basin's hesitant attitude really made him, as her elder brother, extremely angry. Chapter 1907. Peng Basin's reluctance to use the magic treasure he gave him made Peng Shiren's head hurt. It was a golden round pill, which was what Peng Shiren introduced to Peng Basin when he gave it to him. In fact, Peng Shiren knew very well that this was not a pill at all, but an insect sac obtained from the outer god's palace in the old world. He had been communicating with the power of the old world in an attempt to control the eternal cultivation world through the old world, but at the same time, Peng Shiren had always been a cautious person. Therefore he thought of many ways to experiment with this power. Peng Shiren remembered that he had conducted a total of 2 experiments with the insect sac. The first time, he threw the insect sac into a glass of clean water. As a result, the powerful energy of the insect sac directly turned the glass of clean water into a glass of high-concentration cosmic liquid. He didn't dare to drink it directly, but poured the liquid on a dying spirit plant. As a result, Not only did the spirit plant quickly revive and turn into a terrifying vine, but it also obtained terrifying energy. Not only that, this low-level vine actually had intelligence and called itself Ito. Peng Shiren had never seen such a situation, so he made a prompt decision to cut off Ito before it was fully developed. The second time, he experimented on a long-legged worm named Zhou Ben. As a result, this long-legged worm obtained a huge energy gain, and it also completed evolution on the original basis, becoming a terrifying creature between the cultivation world and the old world. However, it was a pity that this legworm obviously hadn't adapted to the huge energy brought by the insect sac. Before Peng Shiren could even make a move, Xiao Ben tripped on its own long legs. At that moment, the huge energy in its body fell heavily to the ground. The huge impact directly detonated this energy, and in the end, not even ashes were left. At that time, Peng Shiren sighed. If this Xiao Ben could survive successfully, with this terrifying growth ability, it would not be strange for it to be called a genius in the world of legworms. However, Peng Shiren had never experimented on humans. From the results of the first two experiments, he determined that the insect sac indeed had the powerful ability to become stronger and even evolve living beings. However, the energy brought by the insect sac was not something ordinary people could withstand. He had already experimented with 2 insect sacs, and now there were only 2 left. In other words, if he were to consume the insect sac, he would have another opportunity to experiment. In terms of bloodline and combat power, Peng Shiren believed that Peng Basin was the most suitable candidate. If Peng Basin had any side effects after swallowing the insect sac, it should be the most similar to his and also the most obvious. In this case, after he swallowed the insect sac himself, he could prepare in advance and be on guard. The scene returned to the scene of the battle. After several consecutive defeats, Peng Basin's confidence had clearly fallen to a low point. She never thought that a servant would be so difficult to deal with. Peng Basin didn't want to get married at all. The reason why she held this large-scale marriage ceremony was so that the man she liked would have some awareness. Even though Peng Basin was clearly aware that with the awkward blood bond between them, becoming Dao companions was bound to be nonsense, as a young woman, she still wished to see the man she liked get jealous because of her. However, it was a pity that the man still chose to observe the battle in the dark, even though they were already at the door. Peng Basin knew that the person had given her a golden pill. If she swallowed it, she would have a high chance of winning. However, Peng Basin didn't want to do that now. She was looking forward to getting injured, and even more looking forward to seeing Peng Shiren come forward to save her after she was injured. However, from the looks of it now, all of this seemed to be wishful thinking on her part. Peng Basin had once fantasized that Peng Shiren would have a good impression of her. She was even willing to go through the cruelest blood refinement array for Peng Shiren and change her bloodline completely. She wanted to have nothing to do with the Peng family at all. However, Peng Basin now realized that she had made a wrong choice. You don't have to think about your master and go easy on me. After fighting for so long, I'm just wasting my spiritual power for no reason. To me, this kind of battle is completely boring. Moreover, this is also disrespecting me. After the last sword strike, Peng Basin and East Emperor quickly distanced themselves. She stood at the mouth of the frozen waterfall in the distance, releasing an extremely cold aura from her body. Peng Basin wasn't stupid. She knew that Peng Shiren definitely had a purpose for giving her that victory elixir. She didn't know the origin of this elixir, but believed that the man she liked wouldn't use it to harm her. Peng Shiren still hadn't made a move, and she wasn't East Emperor's match at all. Peng Basin didn't want to get married like this, so in her despair, she took out the golden insect sac. Is it finally going to start? Peng Shiren was overjoyed when he saw this scene. He had been waiting for this moment for a long time. When Peng Basin put the insect sac in her mouth, it was obvious that all the veins in her body had popped up, and traces of blood flow could be clearly seen through her fair, jade-like skin. This was the power of the old world, which Wang Ling instantly sensed. Before this, he could clearly sense that Peng Basin was hesitating about whether or not to swallow this bug sac. Moreover, it was clear that she had been kept in the dark and had no idea what this bug sac was at all. But now, she had already swallowed this bug sack into her stomach. In an instant, her fair skin was covered in a dense cobweb of veins that had popped up. In an extremely short period of time, even her body turned jet black. She screamed in pain, and her jet black hair grew like the fur of a ferocious beast. Her aura and battle strength kept increasing under the effect of the insect sac. This time, East Emperor was completely stupefied. When he had fought Goddess Jiaoyang earlier, even if she had swallowed an elixir given by West Emperor, her strength hadn't increased at such a terrifying rate. Now, Peng Basin had only swallowed an elixir, and her battle strength had increased at a speed visible to the naked eye. In just over 10 seconds, she had reached the level of a heavenly ancestor. At that moment, Wang Ying finally couldn't help saying directly, "Someone else has changed." The current situation was obviously not something that the Great East Emperor could deal with. Thus, Wang Ying spoke directly. On the other side, Wang Ling, who had been silent all this time, was already ready to go. His sister should be used to feel sorry for him. In his opinion, a person like Peng Shiren who deserved to die should be sent straight to hell. Chapter 1908. Something was wrong. Peng Basin's condition was very bad. Her body had become slender under the surging energy in her body, and the protruding veins were clearly imprinted on the surface of her skin. She was clearly such a beautiful girl, but under the stimulation of the power of the great old world, even her appearance had changed dramatically. Her white Taoist robe had been completely torn apart, and her lower limbs had turned into a string of indescribable slender purple tentacles that rolled outwards. From afar, it looked like a skirt in the dark night, exuding a terrifying aura. How could this be? This was a scene that no one had expected except for Peng Shiren. The power of the great old world was too terrifying. It had directly modified the genes of Peng Basin, a human cultivator, and turned her into a witch of the great old days in the dark night. This allowed her to have the power of the outer god in her body, and it was erupting uncontrollably. The color of the sky had changed, and the dusk sky was covered with a layer of scarlet red that was full of slaughter and terror. It was so strange that it made people feel a strong spiritual pressure. Great. So beautiful. Basin. My good sister. Peng Shiren was overjoyed. Such a huge blessing made him feel extremely excited, and he looked at Peng Basin, who had already become a monster, with admiration in his eyes. To be honest, he had never thought that Peng Basin was very beautiful, but now Peng Shiren felt that she was already a perfect human work of art. Protect Master. Seeing this, everyone in the battle sect had a tacit understanding. Monk Jindang, who was playing the role of Great Southern Emperor, took the initiative to pull her back, and everyone worked together to form a formation. On the surface, it looked like they were protecting her, but in reality, they were secretly constructing a solid barrier that firmly enveloped the entire Peng family mansion. This was an extremely powerful spiritual energy barrier that gathered the spiritual energy of everyone in the battle sect, and it was airtight. Although they didn't know if it would be able to deal with the energy attack of the mutated Peng Basin, this kind of protection was still necessary. At the very least, it could buy time for the surrounding wandering cultivators to escape. This was because outside the battlefield, many experienced wandering cultivators had already realized the danger of the Peng family mansion seeping out. Something's wrong. Why did the energy in the Peng family mansion suddenly increase so much? It's just a competition. Is there a need? Since ancient times, rogue cultivators' ability to predict danger was always on point. If there was danger, they would run and not face it head-on. This was a great strategy that allowed them to step onto the path of immortality. With a few rogue cultivators taking the lead, the onlookers quickly dispersed as well, not daring to stay any longer. Only the core members of the battle sect were still playing their roles and watching from the sidelines. Even the steward of the Peng family was horrified. Peng Basin's outburst was something he did not expect. What was even more unexpected was the servants brought by Mr. Wang Rongxia, who came to marry Peng Basin. If he was not mistaken, these servants had just joined hands to set up an extremely thick barrier that directly enveloped the entire Peng family's main residence. This was not something that ordinary servants could do. You are The Prung family's head steward asked in astonishment. Be quiet. Can't you see that your young miss is in danger? Our master's strongest servant is saving her, Xiang Yi, who played the role of the Great West Emperor, said. In his original world, there were also battle records of him fighting with the old Sun System beings. One win, one draw. Xiang Yi had always harbored a deep grudge against such creatures. Now that he had a chance to observe them up close, he felt that it was an excellent opportunity to learn from Wang Ling. The Prung family's head steward was instantly speechless. Indeed, the current situation was already out of his control. The moment he saw Peng Basin go berserk, he had hoped that Peng Shiren would appear. However, no one in the Prung family responded to this sudden situation. The Prung family's main residence had served the Prung family for many years, and he had almost instantly figured out the stakes involved. He knew that all this might be for Peng Shiren's benefit. But why on earth was this so? Peng Basin was clearly his younger sister, and his biological sister at that moment. The Prung family's head steward frowned deeply as he stared at the sky, which had collapsed under the weight of darkness. The entire Prung family's main residence was now sealed off. It was as if a powerful force from the old Japanese world could dominate everything here, blocking out everything and isolating it from the rest of the world. It was clear that Peng Basin had gained tremendous power from the insect sac, but at the same time, she was also suffering endless pain. With Peng Basin at the center, the energy that was wantonly emitted stirred the air, crushed everything, and swallowed up the space nearby. This was a power of annihilation. Everything that got close to her disintegrated in an instant. Level 3 Heavenly Ancestor. In less than 3 minutes, her realm had gone from the original Tao God realm to Heavenly Ancestor in one fell swoop, and it was still climbing. Wang Ling knew that he couldn't wait any longer. He had to find a way to suppress Peng Basin. Right now, Peng Basin was like a balloon filled with air, using her human cultivator body to prop up the power of the old Japanese world. If he let this power continue to grow, the consequences would be unthinkable. Heavenly Ancestor. Basin. You're more outstanding and beautiful than ever now. Inside the secret room, Peng Shiren was secretly excited. He watched Peng Basin's transformation with fascination, and at the same time, looked forward to the moment when Peng Basin crushed this servant in front of him. No matter how extraordinary this Wang Rongsha's background was, or how extraordinary this servant was, in the end, a servant was just a servant. In the current situation where Peng Basin was infinitely powerful, it didn't matter what the background of this servant who was acting on behalf of Wang Rongxia was. So what if she was a great emperor? Even if she was a great emperor, she would still die. There was a bang. Peng Basin made her move. The tentacle skirt under her feet suddenly spread out to completely cover the area in front of her. These tentacles were made of highly dense energy foam, and just moving through the air carried a terrifying power of annihilation. Wang Ling released his heart sword, and the sword intent was traceless as he tried to cut off all the tentacles. This was a sword intent constructed of mental strength, but the Peng Basin in front of him completely ignored it, and continued to attack with her original will. There was a reason for her fearlessness. Not only could her tentacle skirt affect reality, it could also destroy mental strength. Wang Ling had dealt with the outer gods of the old Japanese world before. Although it hadn't been a direct confrontation, he had fought against the god of the grave, who had also inherited the outer god's bloodline. However, he had found that the mental strength of the outer gods was generally extremely terrifying. Although he still couldn't tell what kind of outer god power Peng Basin was currently affected by, this strong sense of oppression was still familiar to him. At that moment, he looked up at the sky and took a deep breath. The heart sword attack just now had failed. But it didn't matter at all. He just needed to increase the mental strength of the heart sword. He decided to first magnify it 100 million times. Chapter 1909. The traceless heart sword was a supreme secret technique of sword Dao, and could not be used by those who had reached the great perfection of sword Dao. As the name implied, this was a technique that softened one's mental energy into reality, and thus transformed invisible spirit power into sharp sword intent. It was an attack on the level of consciousness, but it could affect reality. In other words, if you were stabbed by the heart sword, not only would you suffer a mental attack, you would also suffer an equal amount of physical damage. In the old world, most outer gods had extraordinary mental power, and ordinary cultivators couldn't contend with them. However, Wang Ling had always been most willing to try defeating the other party in the domain they were most familiar with. Because Wang Ling didn't believe that he was truly invincible, and believed that he couldn't be a true hexagonal warrior, and that there had to be something he was weak in. In his many battles in the past, Wang Ling had already experienced countless confrontations on the physical and magical levels. Unfortunately, he hadn't lost even once. So this time, he was faced with a new challenge. Outer gods were old bosses of the Spirit series. Although Wang Ling had defeated the Grave God last time, the Grave God's inheritance of Sothatha's outer god Taoism wasn't complete. This time, Peng Basin was ambushed by Peng Shiren and swallowed the insect sac. Even though he couldn't tell what kind of outer god's orthodoxy it was, Peng Basin still couldn't figure it out. Although Wang Ling couldn't tell what outer god Taoism this Peng Basin's wantonly surged mental power, Wang Ling could already sense that Peng Basin was stronger than the Grave God back then. Although the Grave God's inherited Sothatha's Taoism was equally powerful, the other party's strength lay in its control over time and space. In terms of mental power alone, Peng Basin's growth rate was even more astonishing than the Grave God's. After Wang Ling's first tentative wave of the heart sword failed under the powerful mental fluctuations, a second wave of 100 million times the power of the heart sword swiftly formed around him, and directly turned into a lotus sword defense that was impenetrable. Wang Ling stared at Peng Basin, whose body continued to expand, and without the slightest hesitation he suddenly shot out a 100 million times the power of the heart sword. In the air in front of him, profound runes from the old world lit up at the same time. These were the outer mental barriers that had blocked Wang Ling's first wave of the heart sword attack. There was a loud bang. This time, the heart sword intent that was 100 million times stronger destroyed all these ancient runes effortlessly. In an instant, they completely collapsed like dried twigs. The Peng family's main residence shook violently. They directly plunged deep into the ground, and then pierced Penglai's core at an extremely fast speed. It was like countless straws piercing the planet at the same time to directly squeeze out all its energy. Once the planet's energy was completely drained, the whole planet would directly disintegrate and turn into cosmic dust. It was obvious that the plants attached to Penglai would instantly wither and turn yellow. With the Peng family's headquarters as the center, this wither would directly spread to every corner of Penglai until the planet's energy was completely drained. Under this kind of energy extraction, the 100 million times heart sword in the end didn't achieve the effect Wang Ling wanted. Although his heart sword kept advancing, Peng Basin kept building barriers to weaken the sword's power, so it was impossible for the 100 million times heart sword to reach the core. Wang Ling sighed in his heart. But running into a wall twice in a row didn't change his expression in the slightest. After all, it was only 100 million times, which was far from his peak. He could see that Saenigus had already entered a defensive state. This dark mother god was trying to rely on squeezing out the planet's energy to reach a higher level of bloodline between herself and Peng Basin. When that time came, she would be able to use the dark mother god's power to continuously produce terrifying rulers of the old days. When that time came, the recovery plan for the old world would be mostly successful. But something that Saenigus hadn't expected happened very quickly, because at that moment, the human youngster standing in front of it slowly closed his eyes. There was a deathly silence at first, and then a horrifying scene happened in the next moment. This time, the youngster's heart sword wasn't aimed at the huge flesh that blotted out the sky, but directly followed the tentacles to the ground. Boom! With just one sword strike, Penglai had already been pierced through. Saenigus gripped Peng Basin's body, and her entire being started to go into a trance. It couldn't believe that a human cultivator youngster could actually do this. Then in the next second, an even more unbelievable scene happened. Wang Ling bent down and crouched over the hole that had been pierced through. His sharp arm reached in through the hole, and then extended infinitely. This was the true hand of God, which directly reached into the depths of the hole. Then, it directly grabbed the tentacles that Cyanegus was absorbing the energy from the planet's core. Chapter 1910. In the face of these mental barriers, Wang Ling had been thinking about the possibility of breaking through them head-on. The 100 million times heart sword had only broken through the outermost barrier, so if he wanted to directly break through to the core, he would need to increase his strength. But the problem in front of him was that he didn't know how much strength he needed to increase. If he increased it too much, Peng Basin might die in a second. Wang Ling didn't want to see that happen. His original intention was to save Peng Basin and get her out of her pain as soon as possible. If he directly destroyed her, the problem would become much simpler. Thus, in this critical moment, Wang Ling was quick-witted. He directly reached out and aimed at Peng Lai's star core, then directly plunged into the ground and grabbed outer god Cyanegus' tentacle. This roundabout attack instantly allowed Wang Ling to regain control of the battlefield. Like a cat that had been caught by its tail, he directly broke through to the front. Hum! An ear-piercing sound came from the void. It came from Cyanegus. It sounded like the angry roar of the mother goddess of darkness, but in fact, Cyanegus was chanting in her own way, using the language of the great old world. This terrifying outer god was erupting in anger. Furthermore, it could already tell that the East Great Emperor in front of it wasn't the real East Great Emperor, and knew that there was another soul in his body. So it roared in the language of the old world, and lashed out at Wang Ling for his rudeness in grabbing its tentacle. It swore a dark oath to pull Wang Ling's soul out of the East Great Emperor's body. In the next second, there was a boom. A terrifying mental fluctuation was instantly transmitted through the tentacle that Wang Ling had grabbed, and like an electric current, it directly flowed up Wang Ling's fingers. If anyone below the Tao ancestor realm came into direct contact with this mental fluctuation, they would immediately feel a numbness spread from their fingers to their whole body. This would lead to hallucinations, and in more serious cases, they would directly lose consciousness and their souls would leave their bodies, entering a state where their spirit and flesh would be separated. At that time, these terrifying outer gods from the old world would be able to nibble away at their souls. But what surprised Cyanegus was that this spiritual fluctuation didn't have the slightest effect on the youth in front of her. She was puzzled. She couldn't understand what kind of existence the young soul living in the East Great Emperor's body was. The soul of a 16 or 17-year-old, and the terrifying strength of an ancient monster. Cyanegus couldn't understand how a cultivator with a human body could be so powerful. In the secret chamber, Peng Shiren also stared at the image projected by the magic treasure. He could not help but stand up from his chair. He stared at the servant, his face trembling. He had never thought that a servant could be so powerful. This person. Just who is he? Peng Shiren's mind was in a mess. He worshipped the power from the old world infinitely. In fact, he wanted to use the power of the old world to combine it with the path of cultivation that he had mastered. Through the combination of the two techniques, he could learn from each other's strengths and make up for his shortcomings. Thus, he could surpass ordinary cultivators with the body of a cultivator and become the first person in history. He would become a supreme existence. Yes, his ultimate goal was to surpass Tao ancestor Wang. He would become a legend in the history of human cultivators. But Peng Shiren had never thought that the dream that he had been chasing for so many years would actually be beaten to it. He was clearly a human cultivator, but he was using his own strength to resist the power of the outer god from the old world. Peng Shiren could never have imagined this. At that moment, looking at the scene in front of him, he felt pain in his cheeks, as if two resounding slaps had been slapped across his face. Impossible. This is the outer god. Even if Tao ancestor Wang were here in person, he might not be able to defeat him. Peng Shiren was a little panicked and astonished by Wang Ling's method. At that moment, he had already vaguely sensed that the young man standing here dueling with the outer god wasn't an ordinary servant. It was even possible that this person had some other great unsolved secret. At that moment, he pinched the tentacle and felt Cyanegus's spiritual power seep into his palm. But not only did it not break his spirit, it was like pouring coffee into his mouth, making his mental state even better than before. This couldn't be considered a mental attack at all. On the contrary, It was a kind of spiritual recharge for him. At that moment, he thought that if he used this to recharge himself when he reviewed how to keep his marks down before an exam, it would be much more effective than drinking 8 walnuts. He had thought that this match would be the same as before, and that the more he fought, the more boring it would become. Who would have thought that this tentacle would instead make him even more spirited? This time, Wang Ling didn't even yawn. He directly grabbed the outer god's tentacle which he had caught from Star River Punglai, and pulled it out of the ground. Then a horrifying scene happened. Wang Ling directly dragged the tentacle with his tiny body, and directly pulled Shaenigus up. Wang Ling gripped the mountainous mass of dark black flesh in his hand along with the tentacle. There was a loud boom. Dragging the tentacle, Wang Ling started to spin Shaenigus on the spot. He didn't show any mercy as he directly smashed Shaenigus left and right with a very relaxed expression on his face. It was hard to imagine that a human teenager would actually grab an outer god's tentacle and rub it against the ground without any dignity at all. Everyone felt a strong sense of suffocation. Wang Ling was too strong, worthy of being a man with the bearing of an immortal king. His every move could make heaven and earth tremble, and the entire Punglai planet tremble. Everyone watching the battle was so shocked that their jaws dropped to the ground. As Shaenigus was continuously smashed back and forth by Wang Ling, the space here shattered and the void collapsed. This poor mother goddess of darkness was so beaten that she couldn't even speak. Before she could let out those sharp cries of anger, Wang Ling had directly swallowed them back into his stomach. Of course, apart from sighing at Wang Ling's heaven-defying strength, everyone present was also astonished by the outer god's astonishing amount of blood, because this blood was indeed thick. How could a normal cultivator withstand a single slap from Wang Ling? Even someone as strong as Monk Golden Lamp could only withstand 10 of Wang Ling's palms at most. This outer god, Shaenigus, had already been repeatedly smashed by Wang Ling more than 20 times, and was almost smashed into a meat patty. But she still looked skillful and at ease, which was indeed frightening. After smashing her for the 30th time, Wang Ling exercised the muscles in his neck. He took off East Great Emperor's outer clothes and only wore the white undershirt, then rolled up his sleeves. Warm up over. At that moment, he stared at Shaenigus, who looked like he had already passed out on the ground. It was an extremely short sentence, but it caused everyone present and Peng Shiren, who was in the secret chamber, to be horrified. What had they just heard? Warm up? That magnificent scene of him beating up an outer god just now was actually just a warm-up? Damn it, he had done it again. Chapter 1911. Who on earth was it? The moment Wang Ling took off his robe and rolled up his sleeves, it was as if Peng Shiren saw the back of a god radiating brilliant light. He couldn't see who the person in this body was, but he could directly sense the glowing, powerful soul, which was the key to maintaining this body's invincibility. In the face of an outer god, a sage body was clearly not enough. As a great emperor, East Great Emperor's body had to be tempered by the vermilion bird fire every day, and his body had long reached the level of a sage body before he had become an emperor. Since then he had been training his body day after day, and the strength of his body had continuously increased. This kind of body was indeed much stronger than that of the ancient cultivators of the royal family. However, in the battle with the outer god, Wang Ling could still clearly feel that this body wasn't strong enough. During the process of smashing the outer god just now, East Great Emperor's body had also felt a faint pain because of the tremendous force that had attacked the outer god and the backlash. But it was only East Great Emperor who was in pain, because he was the owner of this body. Although he was controlling it, he was also a little irritated by the East Great Emperor's wails. Thus, he had taken off his robe and planned to use a secret technique on this body to make it stronger than before. At that moment, East Great Emperor's upper body glowed with golden light, and runes appeared all over it. These weren't spirit talismans, nor were they mysterious characters from ancient times, nor were they the characters of any tribe in the universe. Instead, they exuded a powerful divinity that seemed to come from the origin of the universe. Mark of an immortal king. Wang Ying was secretly astonished and horrified. Even he hadn't expected Wang Ling to use this method at a critical moment. This was a secret technique that combined a life-bonded Dharma idol with a designated soul and body, and was completely under Wang Ling's control. Once the fusion was achieved, a glittering mark of divinity would appear on the body. As Wang Ling's shadow, Wang Ying was well aware of the origin of this technique. If the person he was facing wasn't a strong enemy, there was no way Wang Ling would use this technique at this time. He had only used his natal Dharma idol once a long time ago, and at that time, it hadn't reached the point of directly combining it with his natal Dharma idol in battle, and had mostly been used to intimidate and awe. This time, when Wang Ying saw that East's great emperor's body was densely covered with marks of an immortal king, she clearly knew that Wang Ling was serious. He wasn't just joking when he said the warm-up was over. Buzz. With the support of the mark of an immortal king, the East's great emperor's fair and delicate body was strengthened even more. His body seemed to have become the center of the universe. Vaguely, they could see the sun, moon, and stars revolving around the East's great emperor's body. With the support of the mark of an immortal king, his physical body had evolved into an immortal king body, directly nurturing the embryonic form of the universe within one's physical body was horrifying. Xiao. In the next moment, the East's great emperor moved. His speed was extremely fast, and his boundless magic power allowed him to approach Cyanegus without any hindrance. Rumble. With a stomp of his foot, the ground collapsed. It was as if an infinite number of cosmic stars had crashed into the ground from beyond the heavens, causing the ground under his feet to quake and sparks to fly like a volcanic eruption. Endless sacred fires collided and turned into huge mushroom clouds that boiled over. Cyanegus roared in pain as she was burned, and her tentacles were scorched. Wang Ling's foot directly stepped on the stomach of the mother goddess of darkness, instantly setting her body ablaze, and the flames spread along the tentacles to the lower half of her body. In that instant, Cyanegus could be seen spitting out a lot of mucus, which she used to fill the sacred fires on her body. Although it looked like she was being one-sidedly beaten, she didn't give up resisting. Her powerful self-healing ability allowed her burnt tentacles to regrow. At the same time, Wang Ling also noticed that Cyanegus had spat out many pitch-black meatballs. These were creatures that she had nurtured. In the first wave, there were more than 100 meatballs the size of mountains, and they immediately split open a few seconds after they hit the ground. These were creatures of the past that had been bred from her mother's body. They were terrifying behemoths called black goats. Even in their infancy, each of them was shockingly large and had amazing battle strength, as if they could crush everything with their iron hooves. At the same time, in Wang Ling's opinion, this kind of reproductive ability was indeed amazing. Even when she had been completely beaten by him, she could still breed so many monsters. This was what was terrifying about this mother goddess of darkness. If Wang Ling hadn't been here, even the great emperor might not have been able to withstand this wave of attack. These black goats were already very amazing in their infancy. As long as there were 10 of them, it wouldn't be a problem at all for them to destroy Punglai. But now there were hundreds of them being bred and unbred here. The mother goddess of darkness had a powerful reproductive ability that allowed her to continuously create armies of black goats. At the same time, these black goats also had amazing reproductive abilities. Unfortunately, in the end, Cyanegus had miscalculated, because the person it was facing at that moment wasn't an ordinary person. Wang Ling moved extremely quickly. He directly grabbed a black goat in the air and unceremoniously slammed it into Cyanegus. Wang Ling controlled the mountain-sized goat effortlessly with the power of cosmic gravity. He just stood where he was and slowly raised his hands. In an instant, the imposing manner of a sovereign descending upon the world flourished. Everyone was stupefied. No one had ever seen Wang Ling use a great spell in succession. In the past, this would have been a problem that could be solved with a few slaps at most. At that moment, the youngster stood in the middle of the field with the help of East's great emperor's body. His every movement exuded the peerless and incomparable might of an immortal king. It was as if time and space here had been cut off, and countless black goats were directly lifted up by Wang Ling. Golden light seeped out from their bodies and slowly surged along their bodies. It seeped out from every pore of their bodies and cracked open. Crack! The next second, the moment Wang Ling's palms closed, their bodies instantly exploded. Too strong. Is he still human? After being branded with a mark of an immortal king, East's great emperor no longer felt pain in his body. Not only did he stop screaming, but he also remained quiet and gasped the entire time. This senior Wang's strength was beyond his expectations. Those were hundreds of black goats. The army of outer gods, which had been bred from the body of the mother goddess of darkness, had descended densely here. They had thought that they would be able to trample Peng Lai to pieces. In the end, they hadn't been bouncing around for long before they were all caught in the air and turned to dust under Wang Ling's long-range explosions. Chapter 1912. So strong. Lotus Sun was moved, and her eyes were unconsciously drawn to Wang Ling. Although he now looked like East's great emperor, the youthful vibe that he exuded when he raised his hands and feet couldn't be concealed just from his back. In a blur, it was as if she could see East's great emperor's back and Wang Ling's back overlapping. This time, Wang Ling's attack was magnificent, shocking even gods and ghosts alike. It was a true display of godly might, and everyone at the scene was overwhelmed with emotions. The steward of the Peng family, and the servants of the Peng family who had gathered around to receive protection from Zhang, and the others were all dumbfounded. Their mouths were so wide open that an ostrich egg could almost be swallowed. Wang Ling was too fierce and simply invincible. The way he stood where he was and swept away everything was extremely domineering, but his rock-solid and unmoving posture also showed that he was at ease. This wasn't the most terrifying thing, because those who knew Wang Ling well knew that this still wasn't his strongest combat strength, because his talisman seal hadn't been removed. Even when he was controlling East's great emperor's body with his soul, the power of his soul was maximized the moment the talisman seal was removed. That was to say, Wang Ling was still able to beat up an outer god even though he was sealed. Furthermore, this dark mother god had already grown to a high level. Although she hadn't completely reached a high level, Wang Ling's skillful and effortless manner was enough to prove that it was useless even if she had reached a high level. The moment Wang Ling grabbed hundreds of black goats and crushed them with his immortal king's mystic power, roar. This dark mother god immediately roared. It was as if her nerves had been severed, and she let out a pained roar as dark purple outer god blood gushed out of the wounds on her body. Although she had a strong self-healing ability, she was still exhausted after being abused by Wang Ling for a long time, and her healing speed was clearly much slower than before. This was the effect of Wang Ling's mark of an immortal king, which had 81 restrictive spells on it at the same time to directly block all possibilities of recovery and resurrection. But even in this situation, this mother god of darkness was still able to heal herself very weakly, which was something that Wang Ling was slightly astonished about. After all, it was rare for him to meet such a tough guy. But according to Wang Ling's calculations, the hundreds of black goats he had just crushed to death were a heavy blow to the mother god of darkness. According to its original plan, it was going to buy time by creating these black goats so that it could evolve to an advanced state, and then continuously produce new black goat armies. Unfortunately, its plan failed. Wang Ling had crushed this flock of black goats too quickly. It had only been a few dozen seconds since he had summoned them, but not a single one was left. In its original judgment, its black goat army would not be so weak. Even if it only summoned 2, it would be enough to keep the youth busy for a while. However, it miscalculated, and it even had to face the concentrated soul backlash of several hundred black mountain goats exploding at the same time. Even though the mother goddess of darkness was doing her best to stabilize her body, the concentrated backlash still caused her huge flesh to ripple. Puff! Within its body, part of Peng Basin's body was spat out. Originally, Peng Basin's entire body had been swallowed up, leaving only a painful and hideous face. Her entire body was like a thumbtack embedded deeply into the huge piece of meat. But now, Peng Basin's upper body had been completely spat out, which meant that Sheenigus had already broken free of Peng Basin's control. This was an excellent opportunity for everyone to realize that the next moment might be the decisive moment. Even at this time, Wang Ling was still as calm as ever. His feet didn't move, and he was like a strong pine tree rooted to the ground. Wang Ling raised his index finger and abruptly pointed at Sheenigus' body. With a clang, there was an earth-shattering sound, like the collision of a great Tao bell and a dazzling golden light. No one could clearly see how Wang Ling had guided the outer god with this finger. Wang Ling didn't move from his spot, but from a distance, he had poked a huge hole in the outer god's body. And this was far from over. The aurora at Wang Ling's fingertip carried world-shaking power, as it bombarded the outer god in wave after wave like divine arrows piercing the sky. The outer god was clearly already powerless to resist, and the huge piece of flesh collapsed like meat on a chopping board waiting to be cut. Wang Ling used the strength of his fingers to precisely separate Peng Basin's body from the outer gods as perfectly as possible. It's done. The moment Peng Basin completely fell off the huge piece of flesh, Golden Lamp instantly took action. Together with the clothes that Lotus Sun, Lu Qingyi and Yu Yueqing had prepared, Golden Lamp rushed forward and caught Peng Basin as she fell off the piece of flesh, completely unafraid of the outer god. The outer god had already completely broken down, so monk Golden Lamp was fearless when he made his move. Only the monk, who usually didn't get close to women, would have any objections if he personally took action. What was more, the monk was now playing the role of an empress, and this scene looked extremely beautiful from a distance, so it didn't feel out of place at all. Only after the monk had successfully caught Peng Basin did Wang Ling nod to himself and start to prepare for his next move with confidence. He leaped up into the air, and the mark of an immortal king all over his body seemed to come to life as it moved forward from his body and gathered in his palm bit by bit. There was a loud bang. Wang Ling's palm moved forward, and the huge mark of an immortal king turned into a giant net that directly fell from the sky and enveloped the huge piece of flesh of the mother god of darkness. This was the Sealing King palm, derived from the mark of an immortal king. With one palm, it could suppress all things. Sheenigus had already been beaten to a critical point and couldn't put up any resistance at all. Now with this palm, it was immediately bound. It had no strength to resist at all, and even its roars were firmly suppressed by Wang Ling's palm seal. When the runes of the mark of an immortal king climbed onto Sheanigus's body, the runes immediately began to shrink inward in all directions, compressing the black piece of flesh infinitely. The runes on it immediately began to shrink inwards, compressing the black piece of flesh infinitely. The dark mother goddess body was like a piece of boiled pork that was filled with water. In the end, it was only the size of a small building block. It was hard to imagine that such a powerful outer god could actually be sealed away just like that. Seeing that Peng Basin had been rescued and the outer god had been completely sealed, Peng Shiren, who had been hiding in the secret room all this time, finally couldn't hold back anymore. He trembled with anger and was about to rush out. In the end, he hadn't expected Wang Ling to have already sensed him. Before he could move, the ground above his secret room was completely flipped open with a wave of the young man's hand at that moment. Wang Ling stood on the edge with his hands behind his back and gazed down at him. Chapter 1913. Even Wang Ling himself never thought that his next meeting with Peng Shiren would actually be an immemorial. He looked at Peng Shiren's shocked face, and could not help but sigh in his heart. Compared to the current Peng Shiren, the primordial era's Peng Shiren was still too weak. The current Peng Shiren had not even reached the ancestor realm. However, given Peng Shiren's age, it would not be an exaggeration to call him a genius. At that moment, this wasn't a still image, but Peng Shiren had already been scared stiff by Wang Ling's sudden appearance. Wang Ling felt very helpless. He clearly hadn't used any body immobilizing spells, or even spiritual pressure, but his aura alone was enough to make Peng Shiren's entire body go stiff. This was normal. After all, not everyone could beat up a outer god. Wang Ling had easily dealt with Seenigus, directly sealed him, and even saved Peng Basin in passing. This operation had clearly shaken Peng Shiren's soul. Peng Shiren had always believed in the supremacy of the Great Old Ones, and the supremacy of the outer gods. He had tried to use the power of the outer gods to combine with the existing cultivation techniques, to create a new hybrid power. To Wang Ling, this kind of thinking was really wishful thinking. At that moment, Wang Ling jumped down from the edge and slowly walked over to Peng Shiren to examine him. For Wang Ling, a lot of things that couldn't be explained at that moment could all be explained. He suddenly understood why he had descended into the eternal past to face the script that Peng Shi and the others had twisted. He thought that the distortion of the script had nothing to do with his arrival, because even if he didn't come, the course of the eternal script would still be twisted by Peng Shiren. Apart from him, no one could fight against the outer gods so easily. Therefore, it was an inevitable choice for him to come to the eternal world. In order to eliminate the outer gods and strangle this ancient power in the cradle, he and the people of the battle sect had appeared here. Wang Ling had been a little angry at the beginning, feeling that he had been used and forced to come to eternal time. Even now, Wang Ling really wanted to know who on earth the person who had gone through so much trouble to arrange for him to come to immemorial age. But now, he suddenly realized that the truth of this matter didn't seem to be that important anymore. The only thing he was certain of was that neither the grave goddess nor Baija had the ability to do so. They were just taking advantage of the opportunity. It was only because they knew that he had such a thing on him that they wanted to take advantage of the time when he was away to deal with the Wang family and capture Wang Muyu. If these two wanted to make fun of him with their abilities, they were still far from being able to do so. Sooner or later, Wang Ling would settle accounts with this group of people. Anyone who disturbed his peaceful daily life was unforgivable. At that moment, Wang Ling looked thoughtfully at his palm. In this universe, he could only think of one person who could set him up. Therefore, combined with the truth in his hands, the reason why he came to the eternal world started when Chen Qin accidentally discovered that the short video blogger Li Xian, who looked like him, had suddenly disappeared from the face of the earth. If this incident had been orchestrated from start to finish, then Wang Ling was almost certain that this Li Xian was a fictional character who didn't exist at all. Similar to Baijia's brain ability, it was a chess piece created to guide the development of order. Wang Ling breathed a slight sigh of relief at this truth. If it was just a fictional character who didn't exist, he would be a lot more at ease. The eternal world, outer gods, the will of the universe. These things were too dangerous, and he didn't want innocent people to get involved. So now, Wang Ling still had to carefully think about how to explain it to classmate Chen Qin. Already frozen from fear? At that moment, Monk Jin Deng appeared behind Wang Ling. He had already handed Peng Basin over to Lotus Sun to take care of, and the battle sect members behind him also started to consolidate their resources and start treating Peng Basin's injuries. Large handfuls of elixirs were sent to Peng Basin's mouth as if they didn't cost anything. In any case, they were just playing characters and these elixirs weren't their own, so they didn't feel the slightest pain in using them. Wang Ling looked at Peng Shiren and nodded. To be honest, he really wanted to crush Peng Shiren to death right now. As an older brother, it was really unforgivable that he could actually do such a cruel thing to his own little sister. But now, from the perspective of history, he still needed Peng Shiren to be alive. Wang Ling took a deep breath and directly motioned for Monk Jin Deng to pry open Peng Shiren's frozen palm and take away the last outer god insect sac, which Peng Shiren had taken from the outer god palace. Wang Ling just glared at the insect sac, and it instantly turned into a cloud of ash. Then he placed his palm on Peng Shiren's head and erased his memories related to the outer gods. This was to prevent Peng Shiren from developing the idea of modifying Dao ancestor Wang's legacy scroll and creating the Book of 9 Realms in scroll. But Wang Ling was well aware that this was only temporary. Everyone, including Monk Jin Deng, was also well aware of Peng Shiren's fate. The monk sighed and said to Wang Ling telepathically, "This person is a chosen one of the outer gods. Even if we erase his memories, he might still be guided on the path of the outer gods' revival." Wang Ling nodded. The monk had the same idea as him. So now, the best way was for Peng Shiren to be bound by the Taoist orthodoxy until Wang Ling was born on Earth, so that Peng Shiren could be directly supervised during this period. Thinking this, Wang Ling took out Dao ancestor Wang's Taoist legacy scroll, the Book of 9 Realms. Then he directly opened it and pasted it on Peng Shiren's face. Let Dao ancestor Wang forcibly supervise him. This was what Wang Ling had thought of. At first, Wang Ling had actually been quite puzzled. It was reasonable to say that a Dao creator like Dao ancestor Wang wouldn't have chosen such a lousy disciple. Now Wang Ling understood. This wasn't Tao ancestor Wang's fault. After all, Wang Ling had personally chosen this Peng Shiren, so he instead started to sympathize with Tao ancestor Wang a little. By the way, monk, why does it feel like you don't know about this? At that moment, Wang Ying was suddenly curious and asked telepathically, because looking at how things had developed, Monk Jin Deng had been involved in the whole process, so it was impossible for him not to know about it. This humble monk really doesn't know about this. It's been too long. Once we return to reality, the will of the universe will correct our memories of transmigrating to immemorial time, in order to restore order. At that time, I'm afraid that only President Ying and Ling Jinren will remember this, said Monk Jin Deng. The will of the universe? That is to say, the person who arranged for us to come to immemorial time is actually. At that moment, Wang Ying frowned as if he had suddenly thought of something, and a look of sudden realization appeared on his face. On Thursday, January 8th, Wang Ling and the others, who had stayed in immemorial time for a long time, finally returned to reality. Gu Xuanji and Sun Yinger, who couldn't be found in immemorial time, were also back. As the monk had said, everyone had forgotten exactly what had happened to them in immemorial time, and their minds seemed to be blank after they came back. Wang Ling vaguely felt that something wasn't right, but he didn't think about it in detail. He was too tired to care about many details. In any case, immemorial time's trajectory had returned to normal after Peng Shiren inherited Tao ancestor Wang's Taoist legacy, so Wang Ling was relieved. Now he just wanted to get back on track as soon as possible and live a comfortable life as an ordinary person. Next, he just had to get Lotus Sun to find Chen Qin and come up with a reason to explain the disappearance of the video blogger Li Xian to complete the task. When Wang Ling got home that day, he turned on his phone and was bombarded by a series of messages. Even Wang Ling himself hadn't expected that there would be so many people in class who cared about him after just one day of absence. In a WeChat group called 60 Men's Gang, the first thing he saw was Hero Guo's cordial concern. Hey Lingzi, are you okay? If you're not, just come out and reply. Do you know that big brother Wu Jian in the entertainment industry? I have an uncle who said he's already in prison. I heard that he wasn't well behaved in the cell and tried to open the lock with a toothpick, which directly added to his crime. You didn't go in with him, did you? Super Chen answered. What are you talking about? How could our Lingzi be that kind of person? Grin, maybe he went to save the world, funny. Wang Ling. Chapter 1914. After returning from the eternal world, due to the correction of the trajectory of the universe's will, everyone's memories of the eternal world were already hazy. But for some reason, Lotus Sun realized that she could clearly remember these things. Her instinctive sixth sense told her that Wang Ling must have done something to her. Otherwise, there was no reason why she was the only one who remembered those things from the eternal world. So what on earth did Wang Ling think of her now? After returning to the real world, Lotus Sun had been pondering this question. At least in the past, she had felt that Wang Ling was very far away from her, that he was someone she couldn't reach. Now, although they hadn't developed an intimate relationship, she could indeed help Wang Ling, so didn't this count as Wang Ling already viewing her as a friend? At this thought, Lotus Sun couldn't help feeling much better. Inge? Inge. She called out to Sun Yinger in her heart, wanting to ask for her opinion, but then suddenly realized that Wang Ying had called Sun Yinger over again. She was the only one left in the empty bedroom. Come to think of it, this eternal world experience was indeed a little inconceivable. Who would have thought that Sun Yinger would actually directly transmigrate into a baby's body? No wonder she hadn't been able to find her. It was Friday, January 9th. Today was the day both Wang Ling and Lotus Sun returned to school. Wang Ling used several dozen seconds to quickly go through the content of his recent lessons. After confirming that they were all cultivation knowledge that he had already grasped, he breathed a sigh of relief. You couldn't be sloppy with your studies, and you shouldn't be ashamed to ask for help if you didn't understand something. Otherwise, it wouldn't be good if you kept dragging things until the exam. For Wang Ling, studying wasn't just about learning knowledge, but also a good opportunity to understand other people's learning habits. Because only by knowing how well most people understood and mastered this knowledge would it be easier for him to predict everyone's scores in class in advance, and thus better suppress their scores. This time, Wang Ling hadn't come for 2 days, so he was a little flustered. He was afraid that if he didn't guess correctly and did too well, Old Pan would use him as a role model again. In the end, at this critical moment, it was still Wang Ying who comforted him. He was in a good mood after spending a lot of time with Sun Yinger last night. Why are you flustered? You've been in this class for so long. It would be weird if you did better than average every time. If you do well once in a while and tell others about it, it would be considered exceptional performance. On the contrary, it won't be strange. Wang Ling's eyes instantly lit up at Wang Ying's words. He felt that it made sense. That's right. Every single time he had to suppress his scores, which made him feel pressured every single time. Occasionally he would get an above-average score, and it wouldn't be strange. As Wang Ling pondered this, he subconsciously glanced at the empty seat in the middle of the row next to him, which was Lotus Sun's seat. Like him, Lotus Sun had started to borrow all kinds of notes to check whether she had missed anything as soon as she arrived in class. It was already noon, and she was probably busy dealing with the student union and the Grey Church's commission. Sometimes he found himself quite envious of her. At the very least, she didn't have to worry about keeping her scores low in exams, and could do well every time. Moreover, this excellence was a matter of course in everyone's eyes, and no one found it strange that Lotus Sun's results were particularly good. So this time, should he do as Wang Ying said, not consider suppressing his score? Occasionally producing above-average results? Indeed, Wang Ling felt that this was probably the most natural situation. After all, some time ago, Old Pan had begun to suspect that he had deliberately suppressed his score. In the student union office, Lotus Sun and Xia Ming were waiting solemnly. As number 60 High's newly appointed deputy minister of the Grey Church branch, Xia Ming had become Wang Ling's fan ever since the Nine Dragons Mountain Conclave. Now that he had been accepted into number 60 High's student union, he was also the deputy minister of number 60 High's Grey Church, and was very dutifully recording everything. Lotus Sun had already made up a story about the investigation into the missing vlogger. This video blogger actually didn't exist, because he was a virtual person created by the will of the universe. But the implications of this matter were too big, and Lotus Sun couldn't directly tell Chen the whole story, so she could only work with Wang Ling to come up with a story. In fact, after the people from Heavenly Battle Sect returned on January 8th, Wang Ling had used his own methods to restore Li Xian. That was to say, Li Xian was no longer a product of the universe's will, but a living person that Wang Ling had created using magic. Thus, Lotus Sun was making up this story to explain the specific reason for Li Xian's disappearance. It's like this, classmate Chen. We've found Miss Li Xian, who looks a lot like you. Lotus Sun said with a straight face as she sat in the chairman's seat. Xia Ming remained silent on the side as he started typing away on the keyboard. He didn't know the specifics of how the mission would be carried out, and was only in charge of recording it. He would then write it into a report for the Grey Church's external publicity. Yes, I know. I think she updated her short video frequency. The platform has already restored her account. Chen was also very excited. She didn't expect that her request would actually be accepted, and it was resolved in such a short time. Grey Sect, YYYDS. So, what exactly happened to this Miss Li Xian? Chen was very curious. Asking for the details of the mission was also within the scope of the client's questions. Lotus Sun had expected this question, so her expression was particularly calm. Do you know that Wu Qiao, Mr. Wu, who was recently arrested? Ah, so it was that illusionary Wu Qiao? That scumbag who specializes in using illusionary spells to coerce and bribe young girls into having improper relationships with him. Yes. Lotus Sun nodded. This Miss Li Xian is actually also a victim. But she very courageously came forward and tried to expose everything. At this point, it seemed that everything that happened next was clear. Chen had a look of sudden realization on her face. She clearly hadn't expected that her casual request would actually be so exciting. So, The reason why she suddenly disappeared was actually because of that toothpick Wu's PR tricks? Because Miss Lee wanted to report him. He tried to make her disappear? That's right. Lotus Sun stood up and firmly grasped Chin Chin's hand. Fortunately, we found out in time. Otherwise, it would have been a disaster. And thanks to classmate Chin Chin's report, we had the chance to defeat the evil forces this time. Thank you, classmate Chin Chin. The cultivation world is wonderful because of you. On the side, Xiaoming was stunned as he typed. For a moment, he didn't know how to describe his feelings. He directly typed a side character on the screen. F***CK. Chapter 1915. Just like that, the fact that Wang Ling and Lotus Sun had disappeared for an entire day to carry out the Grey Church mission was suppressed for the time being. With Audiobook's secret help, it could be considered a daunting experience without any mishaps. At the same time, Lotus Sun reflected on this matter. She felt that it was better not to accept these strange commissions so easily in the future. At the very least, there had to be a screening mechanism. Her original intention was to help others, but she didn't expect to be involved in a cosmic-level incident. Good heavens, she immediately said. Good guy. Very good. This was very normal. Chen Qin. Before Chen Qin left the student union office, Lotus Sun called out to her, a little hesitant. Chen Qin stopped in her tracks and asked, President, is there anything else you want to tell me? Lotus Sun took a deep breath and said seriously, that classmate Chen Qin, forget about the publicity. The leader of the Grey Church had just sent me a message. She said that the core of the Grey Church was to keep a low profile. Wouldn't it be too ostentatious to advertise? However, if you really need help from the Grey Church, you can still find them. I'll pass on the message. I also want you to stop calling me president. Just call me Rongrong. Aren't we going to advertise it? Alright. Chen Qin felt that it was a bit of a pity. She was the officer in charge of number 60 High's publicity department to begin with. Every time there was a sports meet or a large-scale school event, such as the Spirit Sword Exchange meet with number 59 High, she had personally written the press releases, and was very good at publicity. He had done a good deed to help others, but he kept it to himself. This decision puzzled Chen Qin, but it was not completely incomprehensible. Moreover, she was deeply moved by this. He felt that the leader of the Grey Church was too chivalrous. He had won her heart. Even if they couldn't publicize it externally, they could still spread it internally. Wasn't that how reputation was built? Word of mouth from person to person was much better than spending a lot of money on marketing. I understand, Rongrong. I won't post the manuscript. I respect all the decisions of the Grey Church's hierarch. At this moment, Chen Qin suddenly laughed. Oh right, Rongrong, speaking of which, you're an officer of the Grey Church, right? Ah, aren't you an official? How did you contact the leader of the Grey Church? Oh right, I'm an officer. That's right, if there's an opportunity. I want to meet the leader of the Grey Church and thank him in person. If it's not convenient, it's fine too, Chen Qin pleaded. Lotus Sun immediately agreed. Okay, no problem. I'll try to relay your message. Okay. After receiving the reply, Chen Qin skipped away. Actually, Lotus Sun hadn't been very familiar with her partners in number 60 High's publicity department to begin with. Every time the student union wanted to carry out work, she would have to rely on classmates she was close with to convey the message. Lotus Sun felt that it was a pleasant surprise to be able to connect with Chen Qin this time. Chen Qin was the director of number 60 High's publicity department, and her words carried a lot of weight. Wang Ling was in fact particularly afraid of other people bragging about her operation in this kind of official publicity document, which had led to her having to go through a lot of trouble to secretly edit it several times before. Now that he had gotten to know Chen Qin, it would be much easier for him to carry out his plans. Furthermore, the publicity department was also responsible for communicating with other schools. Thanks to number 60 High's victories in various provincial and municipal competitions in the last 6 months, the school's overall ranking had improved significantly nationwide, and even worldwide, which gave them a lot more opportunities to communicate with other schools. That was to say, Chun Qin had more connections than Lotus Sun had imagined. Right now, Chun Qin happened to be a Gray sect disciple. Lotus Sun felt that she should find a suitable opportunity to directly lay her cards on the table with Chun Qin. Since she was the leader of the Gray sect, it wouldn't be a bad idea to pull her into the team as a cadre. Monday, January 13th. After 2 days of revision over the weekend, Wang Ling finally dealt with the most important event in his life, the monthly exam. Furthermore, he had listened to Wang Ying's advice. This time he hadn't suppressed his scores too much, and had gotten an above-average grade. Old Pan had already been suspicious of him, and had wondered all along whether he had deliberately suppressed his scores. Wang Ling believed that this concern would be easily resolved once he passed the exam. All the number 60 high students finished their exams on the same day, and they still had to take the usual 8 subjects: language, mathematics, physics and chemistry, as well as Tao Talismans, Spirit Sword and Magic exams. Furthermore, most modern cultivation schools had smart exam marking systems. Apart from some big questions and essays that required logic to be written, questions like multiple choice and fill in the blank could be directly graded using the floating mechanical magic ball used to mark the exam papers. Number 60 high hadn't had such a sophisticated system before, but everything had changed since Wang Ling's arrival. For example, after Wang Ling's arrival, number 60 high's national ranking among cultivation high schools had directly jumped from 81st place to 37th place. In the world, it had jumped from 370th place to 126th place. In just half a year, this was absolutely an astonishing improvement. Coupled with the assistance of Audiobook, an old alumnus of number 60 high, the educational resources that number 60 high now enjoyed were indeed incomparable to before. It had originally been a lower middle high school, but now it wouldn't be an exaggeration to call it a first-class high school. Thus, Wang Ling actually took the exam on the same day, and the results were out. Like everyone else, they were directly entered into the computer, and the rankings were automatically generated. That evening, number 60 high's teacher's office was brightly lit. The teachers hadn't left, and were busy reading the rankings of the key students they were concerned about. They were especially serious. Even Headmaster Chun and Vice Headmaster Monk Golden Lamp had personally come to watch the rankings for this time's monthly exam. That was right, because the results of this monthly exam were actually very important, and would directly determine the list of participants for the Provincial Cultivation High School Freshman Ranking Competition, which had suddenly been held at the end of the month. The previous few times, the list had almost all been chosen from Teacher Pan's class, which had led to more or less complaints from the teachers from other classes. Although they had won the competition smoothly in the end, many of the teachers weren't happy with some of the students who had obviously slacked off, even if they didn't say anything. For example, Wang Ling. In the eyes of the teachers from other classes, Wang Ling's grades were actually very average. But it was outrageous that he could be a mascot every time. So this time, Headmaster Chen directly decided to determine the order of participants based on the monthly exam rankings. Because of this, the teachers didn't have any objections. After all, the monthly exam was the best indicator of a student's current situation. But when the rankings came out, all the teachers were dumbfounded. F***K, what's going on with Wang Ling's monthly exam this time? Why did he rise so much in the whole grade? Some teachers were directly horrified. Wang Ling's grades in each subject weren't that conspicuous on the rankings, and were only a dozen or so points higher than in the previous exam. In the end, Wang Ling's name was directly recorded in the first place by the system on the rankings. Headmaster Chen seemed to have already expected this result, and couldn't help laughing. Student Wang Ling isn't bad. It seems that old Pan has been very strict with him recently. No. Teacher Pan shook her head modestly. Wang Ling has been smart since he was young. As the teacher in charge, she was actually already overjoyed. Teacher Pan had actually been the most nervous about this exam, because Wang Ling's grades had been stuck in the middle, and she had even been questioned by the other teachers about her teaching ability. But now, with Wang Ling's extraordinary performance in this exam, all the problems had been easily solved. Wang Ling, I haven't doted on you for nothing. Teacher Pan was extremely moved. His extraordinary performance at this critical moment was simply timely assistance, and allowed her to hold her head high in the rankings in this monthly exam, which so many teachers were paying attention to. It seems that the headmaster had anticipated the rankings this time. At that moment, some of the other teachers were curious. Actually, I know that a lot of teachers are paying attention to this student Wang Ling. So before the results came out, I specifically asked Director Zhua for his opinion. As Headmaster Chen spoke, he flashed his phone. The teachers realized that Zhua had just sent Headmaster Chen a group photo of the 7 Calabash brothers rescuing their grandfather. A photo of the Calabash brothers? What does that mean? Director Zhua is really an old riddle man. One teacher ridiculed. Well, I think what Director Zhua is trying to say is, as long as you work hard, you'll definitely get something out of it. In the end, the Calabash brothers still managed to rescue their grandfather through their own efforts, didn't they? At that moment, the vice headmaster, Monk Golden Lamp, sighed silently in his heart. He had just texted Zhua to ask what on earth this meant. Zhua had told him. There were indeed 7 hardworking Calabash brothers. But there was only one grandfather. Chapter 1916. That night, Wang Ling actually had a faint sense of foreboding. When he got home, the eyelid warning, which hadn't been activated for a long time, started up again, and it was at that ghostly frequency, which meant that something big was about to happen. Wang Ling subconsciously thought that this was a butterfly effect, caused by his failure to accurately suppress his score this time. So when he got home, he put down his bag and started glaring at Wang Ying. Wang Ying, on the other hand, was still leaning against the wall with her arms crossed as if nothing had happened. His entire body was numb from Wang Ling's glare, and in the end, he could only spread his hands. Then, Commander, I think that even if I'm to blame for this, you can't blame me entirely. I only made an immature suggestion. Who knew that you would accept it? For a moment, Wang Ling was speechless. But with his personality, it was very easy for him to be fooled. Wang Ling sighed in his heart. After careful consideration, he felt that Wang Ying really couldn't be blamed for this. He could only blame himself for being too innocent and too well-behaved. Of course, he didn't dare tell Father and Mother Wang about this after he came back, for fear that Father Wang would find an excuse to dock his allowance again. But Wang Ling knew that the truth couldn't be contained, and Father and Mother Wang would find out sooner or later. But what he hadn't expected was that Father and Mother Wang would find out much faster than he had imagined. When the couple saw Wang Ling walk in with a gloomy expression on his face, take off his shoes and head straight for the room without a word, they sensed that something wasn't right in the gloomy atmosphere. Although Wang Ling was usually an expressionless person, after all, he had lived for more than 10 years. Father and Mother Wang were all too familiar with their son's temperament, as well as his ability to judge and analyze specific situations through micro-expressions. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to call them experts. A normal parent would definitely think that the child was blaming himself for the poor results of the monthly test. But Father and Mother Wang were different. Did you do too well this time? Wang Ma asked. It should be. Father Wang put down the newspaper and sighed with a sad expression on his face. Ai, how many times have I told him? You have to suppress your scores. You don't have to do so well. Being too outstanding would attract too much attention. How many times had he participated in the competition? Little Zhuozi and Ming have to clean up after us every time. Hearing this, Mother Wang shook her head. I think it's fair to say that Ling Ling wasn't the one who wanted to go in the last few competitions. Given all these factors plus Teacher Pan's forceful request, he has no choice but to listen. Also, apart from that time when Ling Ling entered the school, when hasn't he been suppressing his grades? Wasn't he supposed to be sent? I suspect. Father Wang was startled, and then suddenly understood. Are you saying that Ling Ling has already been exposed? I don't think I'll be exposed. Mother Wang shook her head. My guess is that the teachers from number 60 high school are testing him. And as far as I know, because Ling Ling has been suppressing his scores time and time again, the teacher has already become suspicious. That's why I feel that doing a little better occasionally is a way to dispel the teacher's concerns. After listening to Mother Wang's analysis, Father Wang felt that what she said actually made sense. However, the Wang family's rules were set a long time ago and couldn't be easily changed. If he did well in the exam, his allowance would be deducted. If he got first place in the grade, he would be directly fined an entire year's allowance. Mother Wang still felt very sorry for Wang Ling, and as she worked, she couldn't help saying, "The child is very pitiful, don't be too stubborn this time." But I still have to punish him. I know what I'm doing. I'll let it go this time. Father Wang sighed. How could he not know that Wang Ling hadn't been easy, so he decided to punish him a little less this time. A 1 yuan penalty was enough as a token gesture. Thus, even if Wang Ling hadn't said anything, based on their understanding of him, Father Wang and Mother Wang could already guess what had happened. Wang Ling felt that parents were always their children's roundworms. There were even times when he wondered whether Father Wang and Mother Wang also had the mind-reading ability. How could they know so much about him so easily? Of course, for Wang Ling, his nightmare today was far more than that. Because that very night, Teacher Pan directly called him. She called the Wang family's small villa. As soon as she got off the phone, she lavished Wang Ling with praise. Teacher Pan. Amazing. Amazing. Mr. Wang. Although your son's grades in each subject only improved a little this time, he's directly ranked first in the grade. Father Wang. Teacher, how can there be a ranking list like this? Teacher Pan. Our number 60 high school has always advocated diversity. The various ranking lists are set up to give every child a chance to look at themselves from multiple perspectives, so that they can find out what their strengths and weaknesses are. To be honest, I always thought that this child Wang Ling deliberately didn't do well in the exams. Father Wang. Then this time. On the other end of the line, Teacher Pan couldn't stop smiling. But this time, faced with such a difficult exam paper, Wang Ling not only stabilized his usual level, but his grades in each subject also went up quite a bit online. Student Wang's overall ranking soared in one go. Father Wang was already wiping at his sweat on the other end of the line. Teacher Pan, you probably didn't call me just to say that Ling Ling did well in the exams this time. Father Wang was already wiping at his sweat as he spoke. Teacher Pan, you probably didn't call me just to say that Ling Ling did well in the exams this time. It's like this, Mr. Wang. Your child is too outstanding. Furthermore, our school has placed first in the last few competitions in which he participated, so I want to recommend him to participate in the Provincial Cultivation High School new student ranking list this time. Father Wang took a deep breath. Sure enough, as he had expected, what was supposed to come had come. In an old alley in the depths of Vermilion Bird Gate in Songhai City, there was a tea house that had been open for a long time, and a young man in a black trench coat was shuttling through it. Vermilion Bird Gate had been built during the Cultivation era 2,000 years ago, and had a history of more than 2,000 years. During the Imperial era, it had been the main passageway for the emperor to transport supplies every day. Now that it had been renovated, it had become a tourist attraction in Songhai City. Apart from a few more shops, it still retained its original style. The city walls, the arrow towers, the moat. It was as if they could travel back in time 2,000 years. A lot of students were gathered here. Because Vermilion Bird Gate's coordinates happened to be in the center of several key cultivation high schools in Songhai City, it had become a frequent gathering spot for students. At around 6 o'clock in the evening, the man in the black trench coat walked along the old alley, looking a little out of place among the students in various school uniforms. He walked up to the tea house where he had made an appointment and knocked on the wooden door. This was an old tea house, and the words 9 Heavens were written on a horizontal board in front of the door. Who is it? The lights in the tea house suddenly lit up, and a rough voice came from inside. I'm Jing Huchio, and I'm here to discuss the Provincial Cultivation High School new student ranking list this time. The man took off his hat in front of the door and introduced himself respectfully. Chapter 1917. The man who called himself Jing Huchio waited for a while in the 9 Heavens tea house before he heard the sound of the old-fashioned wooden door being moved. He pushed the door open and entered, then carefully closed the door. As soon as he entered, he saw a bare-chested old man with white hair pouring tea. His muscles were very strong and looked rather exaggerated, and his figure was even better than that of some young people. Jing Hechio immediately smiled. I'm relieved to see that Mr. Tung is still in good spirits. No need for pleasantries. Tung Luken smiled and pushed a cup of hot tea in front of Jing Hechio. You didn't come to me today just to talk about a new student list, did you? There's no need to play riddles between us. Just pour out whatever you have in your gourd. Jing Hechio couldn't help but laugh when he heard this. A new student list? If you don't care about the new student list, why did you ask me to set up the Nine Heavens Search Institute to find talents from the younger generation? Why do you stay in this Nine Heavens tea house all year round? Isn't it because you want to be closer to these young students? Nine Heavens Search Institute. As the name suggests, it means that you want to find the elites of the Nine Heavens. What is the Nine Heavens? The Nine Heavens symbolizes the vitality of the sky and the world, and is synonymous with young cultivators. After searching for so many young cultivators for so many years, I believe that you already have a list of them, which is why you directly requested to hold a new student list. Jing Hechio didn't hold back at all. With just a few words, he cut right to the chase. Also, I suddenly received an order from the higher-ups to form a new ranking list for the cultivation high schools at the provincial level. I found it strange. Logically speaking, no one can carry out plans for cultivation schools without the approval of the Alliance of 10,000 Schools, except for you, sir. His words seemed very rude, but Tung Luken didn't mind at all. What he hated the most was talking in riddles, and he liked to lay everything out in front of people. Jing Hechio knew Elder Teng's temper very well, so his bluntness suited Tung Luchen's temperament. If it was anyone else who didn't know Tung Luken well, they definitely wouldn't dare to speak like that. This was an important figure that even the 10 generals would tremble in fear when they saw him. Needless to say, Jing Hechio felt like he did not know everything about the man in front of him. Perhaps everything he knew was just the surface, and most of it was just immature guesses that he came up with after dealing with Mr. Tung for many years. Hee, you are quite sharp. Tung Luken stretched his neck, crossed his arms, and stared at Jing Hechio. What else do you know? Why don't you tell me more? I'll decide if I want to continue talking to you after listening. I also know something about a big plan. Jing Hechio said calmly. Elder Tung and that lord have been planning this grand plan for hundreds of years. Moreover, the selection of elites from these youths was ultimately for the sake of this grand plan. It is precisely because of the danger that we must find talents among talents, the elites of the elites. Am I right, Elder Tung? Tung Luken closed his eyes and sighed. That lord told you about the Earth Core project, right? Jing Hechio was silent for a while and laughed. What else? Elder Tung, how else do you think I would have access to such a secret grand plan with my position? Ever since Earth leveled up, the battle for resources in the core world had already begun. Tung Luken sat up straight and said, the cultivation academies of the various countries all believe that the core world has precious resources that the cultivation world doesn't. However, everyone wants to fight for this piece of cake, but it is not that easy. Thus, Elder Tung decided to set up this battle for resources as a competition, and let the youths be the representatives. They think that they are only participating in a competition, but in fact, they are fighting on behalf of the various cultivation countries. That wasn't the original plan. I can only say that it was a helpless move. Tung Luken shook his head and suddenly smiled bitterly. Now all the countries are preparing their own teams of youths, and we have the privilege to bring an extra team of 7 people in. Why do we have such a privilege? Before Earth leveled up, all the countries were trying their best to open the entrance to the core world. But it is easier said than done to open the entrance to the core world. Tung Luken sat up straight and said, but recently, that lord and I inadvertently discovered that there's a natural entrance in our Songhai city. Natural entrance? Not at all. Speaking up to this point, Tung Luken paused for a moment, then continued. Do you know of a natural wonder near the sea on the outskirts of Songhai city? Elder Tung, are you talking about the Palm Cliff of Heaven? But legend says that this handprint was made by an almighty. But legend is just legend. No one has such palm strength. When Tung Luken said this, the two of them looked at each other, and Jing Huchio suddenly looked enlightened. Elder Tung, you mean it can't be? I can't be wrong. Tung Luken said with certainty, although we still can't analyze what kind of natural phenomenon this is, the first and only natural entrance to the core world on Earth is at the bottom of this palm cliff. It was Tuesday, January 14th, the day after the monthly exam. Although everyone knew that the results were out, the administration office still had no intention of directly announcing it, which made Wang Ling very nervous. I heard the results will be announced a few days later. The school has been dealing with people in white coats for the past 2 days. White coats? Doctors. What are doctors doing at school? They might not necessarily be doctors. I think they might be people from the Cultivation Research Institute. On the way to school, Wang Ling's ears twitched, and he overheard some insightful number 60 high alumni gossiping. These were all senior students. High grade 2 and 3 were out of school later than grade 1 freshmen, on average by 1 to 2 hours. That was to say, although number 60 high had very cautiously chosen a time after school to receive them, it was likely that a small group of students who had left late had seen them, and the news had then directly spread. But whether or not they were from the Cultivation Research Institute, Wang Ling didn't know yet. Because if they were, he would definitely be able to get some information from Wang Ming in advance. But that idiot brother of his hadn't even sent him a text message, nor had he given any hint, which wasn't Wang Ming's style at all. Taking 10,000 steps back, even if they were from the Cultivation Research Institute, Wang Ling felt that they probably weren't on Wang Ming's side. Why would they visit the school at night? And what on earth were they talking about? He was very curious about this. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.